Good afternoon. Welcome to the Faculty of Architecture at the University of Porto to this conference, Swiss-Portuguese Dialogues, Contemporary Architecture. It is a great pleasure to receive this event organized by the Consulate General of Portugal in Zurich in partnership with FAUP, the Institute of History and Theory of Architecture and the Institute of Design and Architecture at ETH-Zürich, and supported by Panorama. My sincere greetings to these institutions and partners, mainly to the Consul of Portugal in Zurich, Dr. Gonçalo Mota, and to the actual participants at this conference, Philip Ursprung and Tom Emerson from ETH-Zürich, Atelier 10 Collective Studio, represented here by Nemanja Zimonic and Lucas Burkhardt, the Studio Studiolo, represented by Rui Filipe Pinto, and Nuno Brandão Costa. Following the New Portuguese Architecture conference held at the Faculty of Architecture of ETH-Zürich in April 2024, the Portuguese-Swiss dialogue now continues at FAUP, promoting exchange, collaboration, and critical reflection on contemporary practices in architecture. The conference brings together Swiss and Portuguese architects at FAUP to explore and reflect on contemporary architecture, including issues of affordable and sustainable housing. How is the Portuguese-Swiss architecture community responding to this challenge? Where do the Swiss and Portuguese proposals meet, and where do they diverge in the sustainable housing landscape? A frank and open dialogue is expected, providing a privileged space for sharing practices, ideas, and experiences between professionals and academics from both countries. I am sure we will have a quite fruitful afternoon, and I hope by the end that you have found some guidelines to these pertinent questions. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Just some quick remarks from my side. I've already been introduced. My name is Gonçalo Mota. I'm the Consul General of Portugal in Zurich. Why am I here? What is the consulate doing in the field of architecture? Why are we organizing this event? Mainly because we found a huge interest on both parts, on both countries, reciprocal interest in each other's architecture. And we decided that it was about time that we cemented a little bit more this already existing relationship. Last year we had a wonderful conference in Zurich at ETH with the Atelier, the Portuguese Atelier FAUP. They are here today with us, which is a testimony of their trust in our ability to drive this vehicle. And this year we decided to retribute with a conference here at the faculty for the audience of the Faculty of Porto. So I hope you enjoy this conference. I hope you brought your notebook to make a lot of questions, because you will have time to make questions. But first we will hear the presentations and the moderation by our three experts this afternoon. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to, in my program, I have Philip. Yeah. I give the floor to Philip. Yeah. Thank you, Philip.
Yeah, dear Consul General, Gonçalo Mota, dear Dean of the University, João Pedro, dear Vice Dean, dear colleagues, dear friends, dear guests, students, it's my pleasure to also address this welcome in my role as the head of the Institute of the History and Theory of Architecture of ETH in Zurich. It's a pleasure and honor to continue this exchange, to continue this ping pong which we started, and I hope there will be more continuations of this game, which started on the initiative of the Consul General last year in Zurich, where we could host Felipe Magalhães, Ana Luís Soares, and Ahmed Begodia from FALA, and it's great to have you here again. We're grateful for the hospitality and also for the curiosity. The meeting today is perhaps even more relevant than it was a year ago. Why? The world of academia is under much more pressure than it was last year. Yesterday, the US administration informed Harvard University that it would no longer accept international students. So Harvard is the leading university of the world. It's the flagship of academia. And to take away its international students is like firing a torpedo to this flagship. So this is something which concerns all of us. Porto, ETH-Zürich, we're all sister school of Harvard GSD, and so we're of course very concerned. The School of Porto, one could now say, okay, the School of Porto developed perfectly with a small group of local educators and local students in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s. So yeah, why do you need international students? This is correct. It developed internally, but the fact that it's still alive and one of the leading schools of architecture in the world is inseparably linked to its capacity to attract international students, to resonate internationally, to be in constant exchange with colleagues and students around the world. So without the School of Porto, no GSD, no ETH, and without GSD, no School of Porto, no ETH. Let us keep this in mind, and let us also do even better what we learned as architects, as theoreticians, as diplomats, to open doors, to open windows, to build bridges, and to connect. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Emerson. I'm a professor at ETH and an architect in London. And I'd like to also extend my thanks to the Consul General and to the Dean of the school for organising this exchange. And maybe an applied example of, let's say, the issues that Philip just raised. As we were collecting, all of us participating this morning outside the building, I took a little photograph of the kind of 4 pavilions, texted it to my partner, my life and professional partner, with a little text saying, "Remember?" ? And I got a text back saying, "Why do you never celebrate our anniversary?" We visited this building in April 1995 when we were students at the Royal College of Art in London. There were about 4 of us. And this building was not finished. It was just a concrete shell. And it was completely empty. There wasn't work going on. It was just a space. It was almost like the most pure version of the architecture. And it was our first trip to Porto. Our first trip together to Portugal in general, and we saw many, many works. We had an incredible time. Anyway, when we arrived back in London, we were more than friends. That's all I can say. So a warning to all your students, this building can have a significant impact on your romantic life. I'm not sure which bit, but anyway. But the point is that at the time, in the mid-90s, Britain, architecture in Britain was sort of somewhere between the big famous high-tech people and some deconstruction coming from the US. And there was a really small independent journal called 9H. And 9H presented architecture that was kind of, let's say, much more rooted in place, architecture that had a more kind of political agenda, that had more multidisciplinarity, and it presented architecture from Porto, in particular Caesar, and from Basel, Herzog and de Meuron, Diener and Diener. And suddenly, to us, these 2 places, Porto and Basel, were like twinned. these places where there was this kind of innovation happening. There was a kind of place where its architecture was generated from within itself. And to us, they kind of fused. And I think that over the last 30 years, I've been back here so many times, I've been to Basel many times. Without that journal, without that trip here, I would never be at ETH. I wouldn't have all the professional networks that we now completely rely on to make our discipline go. And also, I wouldn't have been in the position, let's say, when Studio Fala came to ETH, to welcome them, and that opened up a new space. It's one that keeps on going. So maybe just to kind of echo what Philip said, these exchanges, whether they're to do with climbing into construction sites on a slightly dodgy level, or they're to do with establishing incredibly long-term collaborative relationships, these places are really important. So it's a real pleasure and privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Tom. So without further ado, we'll start our conference. The first panel is composed by the moderator, Professor Jean-Pedro Xavier, our Dean, and the collective architecture studio 10. So we will leave this table and we invite the architects from 10, Nemanja and Lucas. Can you join us? Thank you. The ship is yours.
So, it's a great pleasure to present these two architects and professors, Nemanja Zimonjić and Lucas Burkhardt. Nemanja and Lucas. Nemanja, they are representing the 10 collective. Okay, sorry. So I was presenting Nemanja and Lucas. They are here representing 10, the collective studio. 10 is based in Zurich and Belgrade, and it's an organization working on the principle that value is an outcome to design effort. Its engagement on public themes of interest and open research on the built environment is shaped by its common statute. So, this is an organization. 10 is composed of a registered association, a share company, and an informal collective, providing new formats for interdependent collaboration. It aims to conceive, explore, and produce architecture that both state and expand upon emerging practices in the built environment. Its focus lies on producing architecture within real socio-political contingencies by means of prototyping, urban propositions, open research, and design as dialogue. This work plays out with a range of collaborators, colleagues, institutional partners, not-for-profit organizations, and private clients. 10 is currently focused on developing models for affordable living with particular focus on the value of common spaces and development of new tools for creative collaboration. It practices this through invited studies, pre-qualified competitions, and self-initiated collaborations. Its members are regularly invited to architecture competitions, public events, and academic platforms for their contribution to design and discourse on architecture in society. Nemanja Zimonjić is an architect, lecturer, and educated based between Zurich and Belgrade. From 2013 till 2021, he taught and researched with Tom Emerson and at ETH-Zürich, within which he is responsible for several built research and publication projects. He has been a guest professor at TU Vienna in 2023 and Politecnico di Milano in 2024. He has lectured, tutored, or participated as guest critic at several architectural schools around Europe. His work is being exhibited and published internationally. He was educated at ETH-Zürich and at the Faculty of Architecture, University of Belgrade. He is the co-founder of 10, I already explained what do they do. Lucas Burkhardt studied architecture also at ETH-Zürich and at FAUP. This is quite important. For his master, he actually was here during 1 year in his Erasmus period. For his master's project, he was granted a travel scholarship that led him on a journey from the Iberian Peninsula to the Maghreb and Brazil. From 2013 until 2021, he worked in the office of Edelar Mosaiebi in Derbitzin, with whom he taught and researched over the course of 7 years, both in Lausanne at EPFL and ETH in Zurich. So, ongoing contributions to 10 from the founding project, the Nautilus Construct in 2015, the Swiss Art Awards in 2018, and the House for 5 Women in Bosnian, which is in the poster of the conference, culminated in the collective shift toward larger projects and full-time engagement. He is currently based between Zurich and Istanbul. So the floor is yours. I think the presentation, it's time for you. This is how it looks. Hello, in the red.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I was listening carefully to see if we can really check the box on all of that. It's a true honor to be here today. It's my personal first time in Porto and also at FAUP. So in that sense, Lucas is far more invited to talk about personal experience, but I can say from a perspective of someone who started his education in Belgrade, I've been in my head in this room many times before I ever got to be in this room. So in a sense, there's a kind of travel through time, and I think it reflects to something that Philip talked about, this exchange that we as architects have to insist on, this exchange that we just cannot take for granted and cannot exclude from our daily being. And it's our pleasure to show some of the work we do in our practice, in our agency. We've been asked two things. One was to focus today, content-wise, on maybe more, you could say housing was the term, residential projects that we did. And we are everything but a classical housing office or actually a housing agency. So the only way we can do it is really show it to you via the larger concept and everything else we stand for. And on the other hand, when the department that this particular semester, we have an absolute honor and pleasure to teach at ETH as in the format of a kind of guest studio, an experimental studio, approached us is to come and also talk about the way we work and our collective practice, which is something we've been sort of embarking on since 10 years. And actually, it's the 10th anniversary this year. I was not aware. So there's an anniversary as well there in the room. But I think it is also these 10 important years which have shown us that we are actually completely unfinished in that regard and that we are on the way to still determine that open structure and the way we work together. So today I think we will also show parts of that. So in a way this is a kind of a dual lecture at the same time. After that I think we will follow with questions and the conversation. So we are a group that constantly changes. It's not dogmatic. We are based currently physically in Zurich and Belgrade, so deeply rooted in Europe, but outside of European Union. And that doesn't stop us still from reaching out and trying to do projects elsewhere than our two sort of main geographies. On one hand, we interact a lot digitally. It doesn't stop us that we're not together in the same room to actually work together. We have developed somehow a whole habit around that, which we will show in parts today. But also we do love to meet physically and actually go even into the public space and intervene. So this is the group actually in 2 site visits or after 2 site interventions. There will be today sort of 5 chapters, 5 projects, but we hope that you see links and also can follow the way they sort of coexist. We'll start with something which is sort of in the last 2 or 3 years our everyday routine especially in the Swiss practice. It is a question on housing crisis that we all face, and especially in Switzerland, it is something that has been affecting sort of the daily life of many of our friends and our colleagues. The price of housing, the need for housing, the land you can build on, etc. And we've been invited here for this particular project a couple of years ago to develop or design in a competition a model for cooperative living. A cooperative living is actually a fantastic model, and in Switzerland, in Zurich especially, I think it's more than 100 years old and has many agencies that follow it in detail. And this was also our way to respond to that. We thought of it as a capable structure. And a capable structure is a program that we have in 10, basically dealing with buildings that are robust, that can adapt, that can maintain their character even after going through a transformation, that can host different programs. And we've sort of developed a high-rise, a 60-meter high-rise, basically consisting of several main floors that carry also sort of small-scale buildings within them. You could also think of it also as a kind of every floor being, or every sort of main floor being a kind of its own building plot. On the other hand, I'll show you this quick graph because it's really how 10 works. And we like to compare it. We also try to compare it for today because we are formed through 3 entities. So something which is a standard practice company, shared holding company, which is called Here Works. We have a studio culture, which is actually a collection of many small-time companies, some freelancing, some actual small companies, run by each and every one of us. And then we have on the third side actually the institute, which is in our way the biggest project. And the institute is the one that sort of has to take care that actually within every mission, every project that we got to do, we actually have a kind of greater agenda at hand, be it political, social, be it architectural, of course, because in the end we are architects and that's the way we talk to the world. And between these 3 vessels, our everyday practice, our agency, our members, everyone who joins us operates. The way to do that is very transparent and very open through a kind of system of tools that really show everyone entering our structure from day one till being there for a couple of years on all the conversations, disagreements, never making it personal, but actually being a part of a system that allows you to interact, to adapt, to claim it, and somehow to own a part of it. The same way we actually read architecture. And if we could try to put it into a drawing, it could be one of the drawings that explains actually how a capable structure, whether as a practice, a collective practice, people often say non-hierarchical, which is completely not true, because the moment as an architect you have to do a project, there is a certain hierarchy in place, and you have to embrace this hierarchy. But at the same time, it's a kind of horizontal workflow. So we tend to develop actually priorities through which capable structures are designed. So some of them are concrete frameworks and actually values or missions that last very long. The adaptable parts within the building or actually in our group, such as work groups, that they can change. The operation and the methods, so the methods we work together and also just the operation of the building is also something that has to adapt every couple of years if you actually want to design it as a capable structure. And at the very end, it's the appearance of things. It's bordered on unbordered way of going about every day. It's the surface of things, but it's also something that you actually tend to change or adapt and work on the traces every day. And that kind of a structure allows us to do both, to both design and think about the topics of architecture that we like to bring into every single project, be it a residential or a civic project or let's say a landscaping project. So in order to design a kind of a high-rise, we thought about, well, what can we bring to the table? It was about this single idea that can be read at all times and that can actually survive any change. And the most important part for us was actually to provide that a basic, let's say, rigid tectonic that then can be adapted. The way to build it actually is self-explanatory, but also it's a kind of, you could say, one way that you understand it as a reality and the other way that you actually do it. I think you even here see, because in the fact, the model that you see here was only ever built to the part that you see the little drone flying on, and everything else was done inside of our little room at the time when we were thinking on how to actually show this idea. On the other hand, you also see our entities, sort of the very large, the very sort of fluid, and the very flat one, or sort of a spatial one in the institute. That kind of structure, call it again capable structure, allows you to explore and actually determine other possibilities within it, which to us is a kind of a ongoing question and something we still are designing this building. And even just understanding where you are from these rooms, you would know your place in the building. You would know actually your possibilities, and you would know even how to deal with the space, how to divide it, how to interact with it, how to attach, whether it's a concrete ceiling or a wooden ceiling or a wooden floor. It totally determines your everyday, from the acoustics to actually the well-being even. And we think that's a kind of complexity and richness that could be rather beautiful in terms we design high-rises. Of course, this plan at the time was developed that any of these options or all at the same time above each other could work to kind of provide a very long-term flexibility. Same way we think about how our organization works. And to continue with that quick chapter, I'll quickly show a project that is now ongoing. It is in the planning procedure of a kind of going towards a building permit. It's a competition we won a couple of years ago with a partner from Zurich, Zurich architects, also for a high-rise. So we were lucky that the second attempt landed. And here it was really about thinking, again, the question of why do we even want to do a high-rise? Because at the same time, is it actually an answer to the biggest question we have today in terms of architecture and production of space? And that is resource, and that is also sustainability, and that is actually our planet around us. So we thought about if we could somehow envision the lightest for that particular brief, which was also a housing brief. It was also plus housing an elderly home brief, a lightest possible tower. So what we did, we removed its core and said, actually, in order to remove its core and to engineer it in a different way, we would like to do that by opening another kind of, let's say, possibility for social interaction and social spaces in this building. And this particular project, it's not here, of course, in the image because that's existing, or it's from an archival photo from the industrial area called Sulzer Areal in Winterthur, a city close to Zurich, where one of these plots down there where the parking lot is actually foreseen for this tower, and the whole area is going through a massive change. So we were looking really at this heritage question of what the area brings to us, and decided to work with, let's say, towards strength of each particular material as architects. So we started to combine, instead of to prioritize one or second or third, we, in the discussion with the engineers, we designed a tower which really depends on the best of each aspect. So a steel basically going fast and going vertical, much like the American experience has taught us. The concrete, which in its sense can be prefabricated and actually be very repetitive on both sides and provide an open long-term stability. And then the wood, which would also give it its, you could say, its color, its smell. It's also another kind of lightness to the whole ambition. So somehow pairing these strengths together was a mission for us. And that we wanted to also make readable. So at the moment you're also seeing some preliminary design drawings and images that actually show this tower that will be developed going further. The plan of it, and thinking about it, well, what is there to show is still again the question of this meeting middle. The meeting middle, which usually in such a building can be very dark, can be gloomy, can be dangerous, although maybe not in Switzerland, but it's a place where we wanted to actually have the neighborhood going up. All these apartments up and down, actually the north and the south side, all double side orientated, actually using the two-sidedness of the east and west in the middle and the core on how do you get home to meet your neighbor. Somehow a little bit how we operate in 10 as well, and on the diagram on the left also shows that. I mean, you see this gravity field, you see this kind of entities, but you also see many other points of interest that can totally disrupt us. And we think that's also a nice way to come home every day, not through the same corridor, and actually having a chance to meet someone. And this spaces offer left and right. So on the right side there are gardens, and on the left side they are actually multifunctional spaces like aulas. We called them the winter gardens at the time, and actually today we were with Panorama team and we saw some beautiful examples on how something like this can be realized. Those are spaces that really belong to every resident in the house. So in a way we designed the tower so that these spaces were a gift in terms of economy of a surface, in terms of engineering, in terms of acoustics, energy, etc. So they really have low demand but offer quite a lot. In the sense that kind of collective decision, this is for some reason not working, but that kind of collective decision making is a shared responsibility. The same way we work in 10, the same way we accept work or reject work, we come together, and it's never about a hardline vote. It's always about a mission and an understanding that we want to be in the same place and want to work together. Sadly, the video on the right side for some reason is not working, but it shows you actually through left and right these kind of alternating spaces and gardens actually going up offer a very different sense of being in terms of, you could say, thank you, in terms of experience, wet landscaping going up, because also one of the questions once you design a tower is, do you ever see a bird on your balcony? And we wanted to, working with Inside Outside, our partner in landscape, want to develop a kind of, you could say, an extension of the park that the tower stands on. So in a way, we're still facing this question on actually how to bring together an idea of residence and housing into something that is fundamentally one of our programs, such as capable structure. Second project, quickly to show, is a very different scale. It's maybe really well known in terms of the internet, but I always like to say the internet got it all wrong for whatever reason. We like to show it through other let's say, values and how we created it. And it was really a question that came in 2016 to us. So we were 1 year in our structure from someone who was a local builder in Belgrade. And this person actually specializes in interior wall finishing, basically plasterwork, wanting to do a kind of a model house. And immediately we took the challenge to say, well, we will try to design with him and build with him a small prototype. This prototype was done with actually incredible sufficiency, and this sufficiency we needed to bring back every single time we talked about the project. But it was really about the ambitions first. And the same way in 10, it's a kind of initiative culture. So anyone can start up a project in 10. Anyone can come with a project, or anyone can actually take over a project. All that it takes is a kind of clear mission statement. So we do work a lot through these initiatives. You will see some maybe in the lecture. And they're very simple. As said, meeting digitally, physically, or through actually annotated notes, you take action. And for architecture, we learned that actually the best way to take action is just to do something and to make something. So we somehow made this model at the start of the project, and it was the most stable factor throughout the process, even talking to every single participant and stakeholder through a construction mission. To make initiative is actually a kind of, I think there was a nice finding from one of the cooperatives we were studying, Valve,
that Lucas will talk about later, is that actually you need a rule of 3, which we realize really works. So you somehow need 3 people to initiate something, which in this case, in this particular case of a project, is also the minimum load-bearing structure, because we thought about what holds a square and actually understood that it's the 3 points, the 2 pillars we designed, and the third one being the soil. So actually the whole ground of this house is open and somehow shared for the garden, and we never took any digging there. The house is, let's say, an open structure, open system, 16 by 16 meters large, with 4 interlocking terraces, and these, from which one of terraces actually becomes an interior. You see it on the plan on the right, the way to enter, the way to actually live there, and the idea behind that one terrace that is actually the interior of the house is that at time it fulfills a singular program in the largest capacity of the object. So either you have a kitchen of 50 square meters or a bedroom or a toilet of 50 square meters, and you cannot have all at the same time. Makes it a bit difficult for guests. Same a bit, I guess, so stepping into a tent structure, you really have to get used to it. But it is about taking time, understanding the pieces in place, understanding how they join, understanding how to read it and also to change it, because I think that is really something we are working daily to achieve. As said, I wouldn't even call Zoran the client. He is more of a collaborator of ours. So 10 works in the principle that there's a group of 15, 16 people at the moment, but by need we can expand. The work groups can expand. And here it was really the expansion through working very closely with him from the start. So in a non-traditional way, never hide anything from the client. It was a proper experiment. Luckily that worked really well in this case, but it was also embracing his reality and his limits. So he brought the third partner, and that was his friend who was 1 kilometer away, and he said, I have a very good friend, he knows how to work with steel, let's make a steel house, although he had no clue about it. So he likes to brag that actually his house was designed by Swiss architects, but actually that's really how the construction site looked like every day. So sometimes you can really take that sufficiency or the lack of resource and turn it into something else by design and added value through that. Of course, we studied certain models, certain beautiful models around the context, and on the left side you see just, I think, three small self-built houses from the 70s. There was an island on Danube River next to Belgrade, where we went multiple times with him to visit this island and to actually look at these self-builds. And the self-builds is, I think, about 40 or 50 small weekend houses which essentially have one rule: the ground belongs to everyone on this island. And it has to be maintained by you in your plot, but everyone at every time can pass through, which was an idea we thought was beautiful. So we just really took it to the project, making the garden the central piece around the architecture and actually designing the architecture around it. This is Zoran. He's the maker client behind the project, but essentially he really facilitated this process of us, him, and actually the maker being together from the site, from the workshop to the site. And actually you here see the very developed technology and logistics behind making a project like this real. So this was really, in the words of Richard Wentworth, the British artist that Tom often talked about and introduced us, making do and getting by. This was a conversation, just an excerpt of a conversation that was published a couple of years ago in the magazine called Accatone. And unlike the internet, if you Google this house, you will actually in this magazine, so I recommend books still before internet, laid out the entire conversations with him, of course with the most important excerpts, on how decision-making was happening, and actually all the trial and error that seemed relevant at the time. What happened after the finishing of the house, and that's really somehow, I could say not private, but he continued to play with it. He took it as an open resource. He said, I'm not going to now just protect it, I'm actually going to explore. So he started adding these kind of light builds to it, essentially extending his, in winter, his, let's say, in between climate zones. And we found it incredibly beautiful that he just somehow, without ever consulting with us, because these photos were actually we found out only when it was done, he kind of just respected the project and continued to work with it, which for us was really a nice way to understand it as one of the capable structures. Going back to the logic of why we pair it also for today with also these initiatives is that it's really the 4 overarching topics from our side within our organization that help us govern it, that help design but also help every day in 10. Those are governance, all the questions that matter around biggest decision taking, let's say, where do we go? There is a whole section on finance, which is obviously important to any organization, and with us it's completely transparent. There are also project leads on that, but it's accessible to all. There is the evolution, which is about the next step, or actually a vision. Where do we all want to be individually, but as a group? And then there's the last one, which I think is the pillar, it's the care. And there we try to touch the questions that actually we thought, because we were all also a part of, let's say, more traditional practices that we felt were not lacking because they were there, but they were basically missing from an everyday conversation. So the care is something that we really brought to, I think, this project back in the day, and I think he also started to understand that and see our engagement as a young architectural practice, but he took it to a kind of whole other personal level by essentially using the house in any way possible for parties or actually quiet weekends for himself and family. And our role in the project, and I think that was quite nice, was to really go until the very end, even constructing with him, cleaning and maintaining with him, and actually gardening with him, until we somehow achieved this kind of, you could say, an open prototype that is basically an open playground. To jump to the next, I think this is a project we did many years ago, in actually really outside of Europe, in the Nepal Valley, called Tame, after the devastating earthquake that happened in, I think, 2016. We were invited to kind of develop again a residence for monks, 10 monks, on a very high remote point. And one of course, the premises for that was this devastating earthquake. And what we realized very quickly in the collaboration with the locals was that essentially there was several, let's say, design engineering failures that actually often are repeated with these structures. And this was really the first thing and perhaps the only thing we were able to tackle at the time. But I think on the long term, I think it was a good thing. So this kind of seismic question was really out of our hand, but we actually wanted to design it, and we wanted to work with a group of engineers from ETH-Zürich, from the Department of Engineering, so not architecture, on how to make actually buildings more resistant to that. This was actually on-site workshop with the community. We say researchers, our team of researchers worked to understand just what is possible, but actually that was our office at the time. This was 2015, and it was really incredibly hard to even just dry your clothes for like 3 weeks on the site. What we learned very fast is there were like these kind of ways that they built. One was really using the gravity, and the other one was actually against the gravity, but maybe Lucas can continue there.
Okay. I hope I can keep up with your nice flow. So, yeah, as you can see, one of the main challenge was the remoteness of the place. Took a 2 days hike to the next bigger town, so no road for vehicles, so it's only helicopter or footpaths. Which meant actually there was the absolute demand to build with minimum means and also light materials in order to also protect the people that would be working on it. But also in a way it was something that they could actually that they had experience with. And as you could see with the gravity, stone is one of the main sources there. The forest is protected. It's a UNESCO heritage site. So wood actually had to be imported. They were not allowed to cut trees. So the main building material was stone and sand. Part of it was from the rubble of the earthquake. And what we brought was basically the wood and some wire. You will see the wire later a bit more explained. So when we saw the six, this kind of six main reasons of failure, one of the very dangerous one is the wall delamination when actually the big stones collapse on people. So this often happens in the edges. So you see that there were like frames constructed that would strengthen them, and they were connected in a set of wires also to prevent the delamination of walls. So to kind of, even if it would get damage, to kind of prevent stones from falling in and hurting people. So there was also a live mock-up of this structure built in India where they tested it. Our project was also one of a series of projects that were rebuilt by the Sherpa Foundation. And yes, maybe to switch back again quickly to 10. One of the things that holds us together and maybe in the scale of the most long-living ones is the mission or also the values. We started with some values that are very simple. And I think it's maybe not the single one that matters, but the whole as an idea, why we wanted to work together. And of course, they're getting a bit edited and adapted as time grows, but in the end it's still sort of maybe a stronger manifest than legal forms or other rules. What was interesting as well is how much a little change in something can change the whole. So it's here we had developed a plaster system with the help of 10% of lime. It would make it much more resistant for the weather. So it's actually river mud that is slightly stabilized. There was also probably no cement or almost no cement involved in building. It's also by far the most sustainable building we have ever done, but out of outer means. It's the finished plaster. And in the sense of emergency, it's also something. Like being in a collective is obviously also dealing with crisis, and I think we have made the experience that crises feel more immediate maybe than working in a business where you're not directly exposed. So as we have a full transparency, we discuss many things. So we also try to kind of come up with some protocols to kind of deal with it as they have happened and happen. And we also are learning this, looking at other examples and talking to people. So it's also a constant thing we're trying to get better at and develop for the future, to be prepared. Yeah, so in that sense, although it's maybe a building that has been rebuilt almost the same way than it was before, it's maybe also the small changes and the things that are below the surface that really hold it together. I think we also try to make it a culture. The small moments we try to keep and kind of weave in our history and in our culture. Yeah, this project that comes now, it was sort of developed at the same time. It's also competition in Zurich, almost in parallel with the high-rise that we saw before in Winterthur. It's situated at the lake of Zurich, a bit upwards from the main town, and it's a historical picture. This is the site. It's existing houses that cannot be saved, and exactly. But what was very special and unique in this space was the green space. It's still at the moment this long connected space, and one of the main limitations of the competition was the master plan, which had L-shaped building volumes, and it's actually something we were quite skeptical. We almost didn't apply for the competition because we were unsure if this was a good solution. But then we kind of tried to work with it and preserve the space by while doubling the amount of, or even almost tripling the amount of flats it will offer in the future. So, but maybe something very relevant that we tried to do even before drawing the first line was to think about what would be a strategy for sustainability. In design phases, it's always like you have the biggest leverage in the beginning, and the later you go in the project, it's very hard to make a difference. So we look at each element and kind of try to figure out how to build this thing, how the different entities or the different elements would meet. And also by kind of looking at the weight again, we figured out that already by making a lightweight building, you could reduce 21% of emissions. And one thing that we also learned mainly at ETH, also in collaboration with Chair of Sustainability of Guillaume Aber, is that climate crisis, it's a wicked problem. There's no clear answer to it because the questions are also not clear, and as it's very complex and probably unsolvable through a single mean. So we don't believe in a perfect building material. It's not enough wood to build only with wood, and what was also very relevant in this project was cost. It's social housing. It's the municipality that is the client. So we were allowed to make a study where we could invest a bit of money and reduce actually the emissions for building it. So by optimizing the concrete with a clay-based mixture, we could, for a very little cost, get quite a percentage out. Something that was almost for free now is the insulation material, because the factory changed, the biggest factory changed on production by water power. So basically there you just have to kind of, when you do the tender, make this demand. And also the steel has theoretically a really big possibility. So we compared all these measures, and we got almost to the same as a wood building. And also with wood, we learned it's only certain specific types that are more sustainable. As soon as glue is involved, you're sort of in a minus. So to talk a bit about the project, it combines 3 different typologies. One of it is actually almost like a little row house that goes over 3 floors. So you have a almost private entrance that you share with your neighbor, which is just the entrance space, and you go up. There's also a little basement behind, and you go up to the garden level where you have the kitchen. And this flat, it contains of 4 identical rooms with each around 14 square meters. And we kind of developed this typology for a maximum flexibility. So it can be for a family, it can be for a student housing where you share apartments. So in a way we looked for a very big amount of use cases. And this kind of strategy we also took up on the access balcony type. It's again almost identical room sizes. And what you also see that goes through is the structural process that we need for earthquake. And here, as it's another type, you can kind of decide between the public side and the private side. And one is the south, and the other one is the lake. and the cross is sort of creating a border between, and we kind of had the idea that you can choose where you live. Do you want to live on the public side, or do you want to live towards the lake and sleep, vice versa? Yes, and the third one you see also here, it's social housing. We had also the goal to minimize access, lifts, that all the access is almost cold. So the lowest one is also optimized for elderly people, so they have direct access through the building. And that's the three typologies coming together. So, yeah, geometries of work, we call this. It's how we come together is obviously also a question in the everyday, and we also try to kind of find the right balance between the individual work, group work, but also using the power of the bigger group. And one format we developed that we kind of still are refining is the design sprint. Exactly, it's also something we learned from Tom, as many things. It's a clear task, and you kind of have different teams working on something, and actually you meet after 24 hours again. It's not a night shift involved, but it's also just a time to reflect a little bit. And it helped us actually for certain questions quite a lot, where we were in doubt. We kept repeating this, and we always made progress. One thing that we're doing also is a research about how collectives meet, how they work. And at ETH, at the moment, next to the design project, there's a collective research done by the students. It's a group work based on interviews, and they drew the function of a record label, of a digital autonomous organization for circus artists in Berlin. Valve, a game company of 500 people with a completely flat hierarchy. It's sort of a techno-anarchy ideology behind. A 400 years old cooperative in the Swiss mountains, which is based on a treaty that is only in its 4th edition. So collectives can also be something very resilient and stable. Republik, a newspaper that was, or it's not a newspaper, it's a news outlet, digital outlet, that was founded more or less the same time as 10. And it has been fascinating to talk to them. They also started with an association, and they have quite a sophisticated legal construct. And also an architectural collective, Assemble, who was founded 2008 from London. So to end up with a project that is an emotional project for us. It holds a special place in our hearts, the House for 5 Women. It's also the one that has occupied us for the longest times. It's 7 years that it took until the construction. Also still ongoing. There's still things to do. And it's based in Gradecac, a town in Bosnia, close to Tuzla, 3 hours from Belgrade. And it all started with a plot and a woman, Hazima. Hazima fled during or just right after the war to Basel, and she contacted us through the Engineers Without Borders of Switzerland, who also kind of were our main project partners. They did a very difficult work, which was not actually the engineering, but all the funding and the legal framework, which is complicated in a country that runs on a peace treaty without actually unified governance. And in general, I think it's really the people we work with that make the difference. So also from the constructor to that's Hazima's brother. He takes care of the Mustafa. He takes care of the land around. From him, we actually learned where to plant the trees or where to take the right soil. To Subia, who is a care worker who is actually still engaged with the women, and also local craftswomen that were very inspiring to visit and work with. Yes, it's Bosnia is a rural country, and to get to know it and its culture, at least for the people from Zurich, it was very important to visit it also throughout its territory. And one thing that was also striking was the way of self-help or adaptation. And these roofs were usually done by shingles, but they sort of started to kind of replace the shingles with flattened oil drums or other metal sheets. And this was sort of the main inspiration for the facade, to kind of take this technique, which is very thin sheets that we painted in a car paint factory or a garage. Together, this was a collaboration also with the artist Shirana Jabazi. And on the right side, you see Daniel Gantz, also a close friend and collaborator of us that was helping us selecting trees and planting them. Also to mention Adam Jasper, who is always working with us on different things. So it's, for us it really means a lot also to extend the network of 10 and get people in and collaborate. Also, as you see this floor plan, it's very simple. It has a central space that can be either living or production. It's orientated towards the landscape, which is also sustaining the house. A lot of it is grown on site of the things they eat, and through clearly defined thresholds, you get to the private quarters, which are 5 spaces. And we didn't really know in the beginning how the house would be used. One space to mention is also the storage on the top. It's a multifunctional space. It's also there to kind of use as a mass sleeping space if there are workshops or gatherings. But one thing we realized is that how the house kind of was inhabited was hard to foresee. And in the end, we thought actually all the 5 rooms would be constantly occupied, but they figured out it would be best if one would be always empty to kind of serve as a place for an emergency of refugee. And there were families living there, way more than 10 different women, sometimes with children, have already lived there, and some are constantly giving more stability and doing a lot of very important work. So it was very important for us to make this house also a place that they would be happy to make their own. And that was also one of the main ideas with Shirana. In a way, we had the raw structure, and we said, actually, hey, you decide on the surfaces, maybe not all of them, but it's a start, and we let them do the rest. And in the very first image of Nura, the woman that lived on the plot, you saw that Bosnian culture is all about layering carpets, layering textiles. And in that sense, we provided a very basic first layer, and the house is starting to change its face and it's surprising us in a very astonishing way. Yeah. So that would be it.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation, and congratulations for your work. But now it's time for questions, questions and answers. Of course, I would like to listen you, the audience, and posing some questions to these 2 representatives of 10 studio. But in general, I don't know if someone wants to make already a question. I can, meanwhile, say something. I was very much impressed with two things. I think that I liked very much, I have to say that I'm teaching geometry. So I enjoyed very much that figure where you have the transformation of the conoid into the cone. But this idea of transformation is very deep inside the way you do architecture. Mainly where you put it together with the high-rise, with the concrete slabs, 3 floors, and the different arrangements that it's possible we can divide the space with wood and several layouts. And what I was impressed also was with the idea that you put on writing. We investigate, we research through design. I would like you to elaborate a little more, because as you know, this is a question that everybody poses, and many people doubt that we investigate, we architects investigate through design. So I would like to hear a little bit more about that. Transformation on one side. You can also put together the participation of people during the design process, and also the question of the research thing. How do we investigate through design?
Red. Thank you for picking that up. It's something that, how to say, the transformation, of course, is easy to do in a diagram of a geometry, but I think the idea is that we are constantly in our practice, in our, let's say, civic role, because architects are first civic creatures. We face dead ends constantly, whether it's a fact that this and this university will not accept international students, or this political figure will decide that, or building code tells you that, or a client comes with a kind of a budget cut, or there is all kinds of constraints. But something which is, I think, part of the whole ETH, let's say, experience that we brought through both our teachers, our time at ETH, something we've taught also at ETH, and we brought to the practice, and we are trying to work with it, is that actually constraints are a fantastic thing. And what you need to do with the constraints is give it a clear geometry first. And that geometry is yours to pick. That's I think Luca said, your biggest leverage is at the start of the design. So the transformation comes later. That's something that you might or might not be a part of. But I think if the solid base is there, let's say like in some of our projects, even if the transformations are informal or later formal, even done with an architectural hand, we are fine with that. I think as a group, we are fine with that because there is no single authorship in that sense. And there is a conversation through design that leads to that strong outline, the lineament. And the lineament is the one that has to survive 500 years. Not just, yeah, exactly. And I think in that sense, we are really old school. But I think what we try to do is to apply it through also the acknowledgement that it's not only about us as designers, as architects, that there's other stakeholders, whether makers or inhabitants or owners that will simply adapt what we do. And that's something we truly try to embrace. And I think in that sense, that maybe links in some way to trying to answer your second question. And that is the design through research. You know, I don't think, I do remember, I think Philip Ursprung once said, there is no such thing as research, there is researchers. If I'm wrong, please tell me. But I completely align with that, because it is a thing where it is the people you work with and the people that surround you that completely determine your understanding of what your design should do. And in that sense,
we love to surround ourselves with expertise because we are not experts at everything. I think we are slowly, as a profession, maybe even losing the generalist approach that was able to go into everything. So it is really, I think, a challenge without accepting a defeat there. But I think the idea is to facilitate the expertise and the knowledges that help us, whether writing or making or welding, writing or welding comes together well, that actually comes back into the design process and we bring it in and we decide where that actually can make a really significant impact and a difference. Because an impact that the design, I think, from research can have is tremendous if you are, again, clearly focused on what is that mission from the start. And I think in every single project, when we start the project, there is no such thing as predetermined outcome. There is no layout that we fill out. There is no floor plan layout that we pursue as designers. We tend to open each project as an investigation. It's completely an unknown. It has to end up with, because we are trained architects, it ends up with the architectural design, which is only as I said, an open structure to much bigger problems. But the idea is that through that and through the input of us setting up the framework and through the input of actually different expertises alongside with ours, which is the spatial, material, proportion expertise, which is also in part understanding the social dynamics, but also the material culture behind all of that we deal with, is to somehow bring it together. And through that process, I think Lucas just showed this one quick video. Of course, it's the platforms that we use that enable everyone to access information, that enables us to bring information together and to actually draw it in the end in terms of a design. And that's, I think, the key thing is to keep your doors open to other, let's say, a different knowledge than yours, but still to kind of give it a clear framework. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, maybe just something to add in terms of geometries. We were also once described as a very graphic office or a practice that works with really clear kind of graphical geometries almost. And maybe this could also be because we need to communicate together, right? It's something that sticks, and if it's sort of the result of everyone understands that a circle is a circle and so on, together with a certain flexibility that everyone can imagine different ways to use it, it's maybe also that it helps. It's maybe also a product of a lot of voices coming in, that it has a certain clarity.
Thank you very much. So, what does the audience has to say? Someone wants to use the mic, okay?
Hi. Thank you very much for your lecture. It was really great to see you presenting your work. It's the first time I actually see a lecture from you. I knew your work, of course, and it was even more enriching, the lecture, than or extra layers onto the work that I already knew from you. My question may be continuing a bit on what you were discussing before. How do you deal with this part of the starting of the design and association with the research when you have such different clients or approaches? So one thing is building in the middle of the mountains, or doing a competition in Switzerland, or having a commission in Switzerland, or something else. Is there a difference between the way you approach? Of course, I imagine there are some common things, but maybe to do this parallel between two very different worlds, how do you deal with it?
I mean, maybe like this, what you just saw is the most honest answer. Do you want to go for it, or I should? I think it is, there is, through using, let's say, a really transparent, I don't even know if the word transparent is the right one, but through using a channel of communication that allows everyone to be up to date at all times. So let's say, first of all, we all share an email. Who answers to that email, we simply agree. It's never a question of a veto. We never got to a veto. There was always a tendency. And we've also, let's say, we're really proud when we started to reject certain projects, although we needed work. But there was a clear conscience around the group that we need to do that. And the best way forward is really that, in the way of setting a question whether there is interest, who carries and shares that interest in the group, and actually then allowing through this, let's say, the 24-hour open studio workshop, that every single, not just member, but also outside collaborators could just simply join and determine the scope, the trajectory of the project. And actually the rule is unwritten rule, because I don't think we have that many rules at all, is that you follow just the best idea. And who picks it up and develops it, that's where it somehow becomes interesting, because I think there's just multiple voices paired with conditions, and those parallel realities, I think, are part of something we accept as a practice. Because, let's say, the architectural language, going back to the geometries, the architectural language depends on the three shapes a lot of times, which are, everything else is an add-on or a combination of such. But we also try to go beyond them. And I think it is really up to the project team to determine the size, in a responsible way, to determine the size of the team working on it, the dynamic, the input seeking, and that participation of the group. And in a way, there is also, of course, the experience. That's why I said such thing as hierarchies and non-hierarchical structures. That's very difficult, because in architecture you still need them, because that's about experience. But it's about how you go beyond that and actually open that process up. So I think the way to start is very easy, but actually the way to structure the process in each project is actually something that is a real challenge, I think, immediately for us. And luckily there is, as I said, 15, 16 of us. It keeps changing because some people have different dynamics. That also is a self-explanatory thing. Sometimes it's the question of open resourcing, that simply there's a team with that kind of capacity, that kind of ability, that kind of skill set and interest that picks up a subject, which does not exclude anyone else. So I would say in the most sincere way, it is a question that is often discussed, because in the end, there might be few more or many more projects to come, but actually to keep the structure going in that way is a project in itself.
Is it answered?
Wait a moment, sorry.
Okay, now. Is my moment over? Okay. There was, I don't remember the wording precisely, something about reinforcing territory through form was one of your 10. Please correct me, is that correct? Yeah. You sort of briefly, glancingly mentioned that the architecture is ultimately related to a few simple geometric forms in the end. And I don't know if that has something to do with your notion of form in that point, but if you could expand a little bit on the idea of relating two words, territory and form, both of which I think have many possible interpretations, and I'd like to hear yours.
It's not an easy question. Well, what I can say is that we do a lot of studies first, right? And especially those projects that are related to territory in a way, like, for example, the last one, the House for 5 Women. I think we had, probably 7 designs or something by different people. And we also tend to hand projects over at a certain point. So this project was handed over a couple of times, and some things stayed and some things, eroded, and new things came. And in a way that is maybe everyone brings a bit of a different reading, and the heavier parts and the stronger parts stick. So that, I think, it's almost a territorial thing in that sense. And in the end, this project, it was really about embracing the landscape. Of course, also offering protection, offering covered workspace. It's also still there's some additional things growing in the territory outside, chicken coop, and so on. But I don't know if that really answers your question. But Nemi has a...
Yeah, it's really a great question, but I think there's a question of scale with that. I think we've never tried to do it on a grand scale. And maybe just to reflect on these two small scalar projects, one that you're seeing now, it's a very rural residential area. The fact how we designed, and actually Lucas hand over actually the team over the 7-8 years of doing this project, because it was a startup. We essentially found financing from it from day one. There was no client in that sense, together with Engineers Without Borders from Switzerland. So it was really, you had to have an idea, you had to have a geometry, you had to have a form, you had to have architectural clarity that is resilient to a lot of things. 2 presidents changed in the meantime, right? So in that country. So I think the idea that we brought there to this context was that it's a house, kind of like an institution. Not that it has to stand out, but it's welcoming everybody. It's generous. It offers spaces which are probably double the size of their normal spaces or triple the size of the normal living room. So if you have a living room of 100 square meters, suddenly that's a form in landscape which is different than any other in the whole area, right? So if I can sort of bring it down to that scale, I think in that sense it really works. And it's not about the kind of pop-up culture or suddenly something happened which is strange and we want to see it. It sends a signal of something else happening there. And on the other one, I think it was also a kind of a small anecdote, because there was a year of break while constructing this kind of steel house on the premises of Belgrade. And first we did those 2 concrete, call them foundations. It's foundations that stand on the ground, right? And they have a very strong form. And of course, together with, let's say, how we design the shutters and how everything the house is actually executed, that all speaks to each other, the lightness and the heaviness, etc. But actually the anecdote in the small village was that somebody's building a bridge because the concretes were there. And they were again outside of an ordinary residential scale. They were another kind of scale, a scale of a garden bathroom, because one of them is actually a bathroom, where it's actually a closed bathroom. So in that sense, it is, if I answered, I don't know, but it's an attempt to actually deal with architectural means and tools that sort of change the expected or an everyday, that actually then really sort of solidifies it as an attempt.
Yes, maybe as a last further try, in terms of means, this project, but also the one in Nepal, they're also very territorial in terms of skill, in terms of materials. So we really, we wanted to build a wood house in Bosnia, and it was not possible. There were no places that would do wood buildings or even mills close by. So we actually also very often, or we learned actually to work with craftsmanship that is close by, is available, and makes sense socially, but also economically, and it resulted in very interesting decisions, I think.
Okay. I don't know. We are a little bit out of time. The dialogue has just begun, and so Someone else? I have a provocation for you. You have that your Farnsworth moment in the house, Avala house you made, and are you still in good relations with the owner?
Actually, he in really good relations. To answer the questions short, the long answer is that it got better because he wants to do on the second house. There is somebody who actually wants to now get this house from him, and he's thinking that he needs a kind of another whole other experience in another material. But what is nice is that somehow he came to us with because he lived in a city and lives in a city. He came to us with a question. I want to build a seasonal place. I don't need to be there all year long. I need it for my rest, etc. And as he was building it, actually he identified himself with it, although it's not his skill. So in that sense, it's really, I would say he almost became part of 10, or he really was part of 10 before we even started to think about it. So I think in every sense, yes, up until now. So I think we will, I mean, the house is of course still there, and at the moment it's going through some light renovation in terms of energy and so on, but I think any one of you in Belgrade, of course also in Zurich, 10 is always open, the doors are always open, and we are more than happy to show you these projects, but also hopefully the ones that you just saw that are under the way.
Before this conference, I was talking with you, mostly with Lucas, and I was saying that what is clearly very important in architecture is to have a good client. And I think to have someone that understands you and who can work with you, it's a key, one of the main keys to have a good result. And so, congratulations.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else, or is it time for an applause?
Well, maybe just one last thing. I think it's more or less on the day 14 years since I've been last year in this space, and I just wanted to use the chance to actually thank you for hosting me, or for this enormous hospitality that was brought to me by the school, but also by my fellow colleagues back then, the students, and actually also other friends from the city of Porto. So it's still very present and doesn't feel like so.
You are always very welcome.
Thank you
very much.
It's now my honor and pleasure to moderate this session with Nuno Brandão Costa. I assume that I don't need to introduce you because you are a professor in this school, and if there's any students who do not know Nuno so far, just stay here and then you will know him. You're one of the important voices, I would say, of the contemporary architecture, also of Porto, of Portugal, of Europe. You have, as a very young student, been in exchange in the still very small and young office of Herzog de Meuron, 92, and there's just a book that came out recently where you reflect on 3 buildings from this period. It's one of many books. I won't go into the list of publications, list of projects, list of prizes, list of teaching that you have done, but just thank you for the opportunity to have this exchange. I started this day in Porto in your most recent building, and now look forward to how you present this to us. Great to be here with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Philip. And I would like to thank the consulate for the invitation, and also the faculty well, I'm at home, but anyway, I would like to thank also the invitation to be part of this seminar. I would also like to compliment the last presentation of the studio of Lucas and his partner. I was really happy to see your work. It has a lot of quality and it's very consistent, and you are very young. It's very, well, you were my student, so I'm even more proud, I must say. And it was really very interesting. So I will present, as Philip said, this building I made in Oporto, which is a terminal for buses and cars, and I will make a very short and brief presentation and a simple description of the project as it is already built. I start with this still from a Jean-Luc Godard movie. Jean-Luc Godard, I think everybody knows, was a filmmaker which is very new, is very famous by his, especially by his movies from the 60s and the 70s, from the phase of the Nouvelle Vague. But in the end of his career, when he was really getting older, he made some very interesting movies, very experimental, that you can see. This one was made in 2014, and it's called L'Adieu au langage, and I was just enjoying the movie, and after some minutes the movie starts, there is this frame, which I think is a quote from an academic philosopher French, I think it's Jacques Delille, but I'm not sure. But anyway, what it's really matters here is that I read these sentences and I stopped the movie. I was at home, I stopped the movie, and because I felt a great empathy with it, because in a way, that's the way, with my lack of talent, that I do architecture. Well, so I will show you this big building that I got this job through a public competition that I had luck to win in 2017, and then there was the process of the project and the process of the building site, which is always a long process, and I must say that I enjoy a lot that this process of architecture, this craft, it has to be a lot with a long time, that give you time to think and to change and to rethink and to redesign. It's this slow thing, it's something that I really enjoy in my profession. So this title that I put here in a kind of informal way, it's something that I think that in a sense synthesizes this project, because these problems that we architects have to deal with, they are always in a kind of conflict, let's say, or some kind of paradox, and somehow the architectural project has to put it together in a kind of logical way. It's a kind of, let's say, we could say that the project is also a process of putting together things that in a first glance wouldn't be compatible in a way. So it's about this idea of typology versus topography, and the idea of ecology, which has to do with the environment, versus morphology, which has to do with the building form. And typology has to be with the choice that you have to do, how to put the building working. I think we also saw that on the last presentation. And topography is the condition that you have when you receive a plot, and how you deal with it, and how you transform it. So this is This is the plot to work that we have to work. It's a big plot with 50,000 square meters. And there was this... Isto dá para apontar? Yeah. So there was this, the plot was all this. Here and here. So it was quite big, 50,000 square meters, and there was no rules for the footprint of the building, so you could put the building wherever you wanted. There was only this program, which in a way was quite simple. There was this park car for 2,050 cars. There was this terminal for the buses, which was like a big station. There was all these paths that you had to articulate it with the bicycles, people, and there was a very short layout for administration and services for the building, and little equipments like bathrooms and all that. So you see the place was a kind of a mess. When you came out from the highway, there was this kind of lost place, nowhere place with no roads, very difficult to walk and to drive in. But there were these three main structures that I somehow identify, which was this old, beautiful industrial equipment, this 19th century college, which is strangely looking to the north with this patio. And then there was this old farm lost here, this old building that also in the briefing of the competition, they say that we could even throw it out because he was in a very bad condition physically, and he also was in a very bad condition in terms of urbanism because he has this stressed distance to the highway and to the railway rails. So in a way, I identify these three morphological elements, plus the highway, of course, plus the railway ways, and this kind of fragment of the old city that was somehow lost on the east part of the city. But this is an old story because the railway in the 19th century cut the city in two, somehow, and the east part of the city, which is this part on below, was started a process of being forgotten somehow, socially, physically. Well, nobody would go here, nobody would cross the railway. And then in the 90s, they made this highway, and this became even more like a lost island, this piece of land. So these are some pictures of before my intervention. As you could see, it was this urbanistic mess where you couldn't walk properly, very rough place, no trees, no parks, no gardens, a lot of cars. And even, you know, to go through the places, there were all these kind of anthropic situations. So, as Philip said, in the 90s I lived in, I was very young, I was almost still a teenager. I was 20 years old, 22 or something. And I lived in Switzerland, where I was working with Herzog and de Meuron. And I got to know one weekend this incredible building by Aurelio Galfetti, which is the swimming pool of Bellinzona. And I always was very impressed by this building. And then later, some years later, it happened, a beautiful coincidence that I taught in a school in Spain with Galfetti. And in a conference, he showed this building and he detailed the explanation of the building, which I already knew. But what is really incredible in this, among other things, is that Galfetti, with a very simple line, and on the argument of doing a public swimming pool, which in the end is just a tank with water, and with this simple line, he somehow solves a lot of questions in the city, a lot of articulations, and also especially he introduces a new atmosphere in a place with this very simple gesture. So this was always in a very early state of the project, it started to be this very strong reference for my project. It was my reality in a way, and I had to compose this reality with the real state of the place. So, I thought about stressing as far as I could this big program in a limit very near to the railway station to liberate ground in the east to somehow plant a big park, because this area of the city was, as I said, was very rough, was not very pleasant. So in a very early stage, the idea of the terminal started to be infrastructural building with a very simple geometry stressed into the railway line, to liberate the place for a big park, natural park. So this is an early sketch I made on the table. And as you see, I draw this alignment, south-north, which somehow corrects the city elements, introduces a kind of a rule. And then I made another line, another alignment, which is parallel to the railway lines. And in between these two lines, these two alignments, this one and this one, there is this triangular space that would be enough in surface for the terminal. So we stressed the equipment, we pushed it as far as we could near this existing infrastructural, and then we pushed a new street as far as we could to the east, and in the middle we gained this surface to produce this big natural park that goes along with the topography. So there is this kind of dialogue or this kind of dialectic between this artificial gesture of the architect, which is to draw an alignment which has to do with an mental somehow process, and use the nature with the topography, which in the end the topography is not totally natural, to make this relation between this new building and the existing elements, urban elements, let's say. So, some pictures, and as you see, there is this very strong alignment from the south, coming from the south, from the light of the river to the north, and then there is the other alignment that is parallel to the trains, and in between there is this triangular huge pavilion which produces the space for the buses. And as you see also here, it's very clear that suddenly this building, that one, and of course this one, turned to be the key, the pre-existing key of this strategy. And then this once lost, this is like being the gymnasium, this once lost fragment of the city somehow is connected to all these structures. And then in between there is this big park, which extends also the existing natural elements. Go, say the building. It's also a typological exercise, which is a very old known typological space, which is the gallery. So the building is a big gallery which is divided in two levels. And here in this model you can see in the high level, it's the level of the pedestrian. When the people is walking on this south-north gallery, which links all these urban elements and make the vertical points to go down to the terminal. And on the more down level, it is the level of the mechanical circulation, cars, buses, bicycles, etc. So there is this horizontal kind of urban morphology, and then there is this vertical separation of functions. There was also another issue which was very important, two issues which were very, well, one issue which is very important, which was the economical issue. I had for an intervention of 50,000 square meters, 13 million euros, which is like nothing. So we had to do something with very few meanings, very ruled, with a very economic, structural and constructive process. So we kind of defined this modulation, which is the modulation of 3 cars parked, 7.5 meters to make this portico that repeats all over the structure and somehow organize all the program, all the projects, and all the spaces. And also very important, you could imagine the cost of all this in very big places, very big spaces of this amazing dimension being treated with mechanical hair. That would be unsustainable. So we had to make this building as a breath organism where we define these big holes so the air circulates here in a natural way and there is not mechanical treatment of the air. That was also very important. So in a way, the building is designed with this kind of economical, functional preoccupations, and it's also a result of the input of the engineering, the mobility engineering with the cars, you know, the very remains of the cars, of the buses, the dimension that they need to park and to drive, the calculation of this surface of air that has to go inside the building and go outside, and the fluidity of this air, and then to the geometry of the place, or let's say the geometry that the place give us to define the space and the urban strategy. So this is the ground floor. It's a one-way building, so the cars enter in this part and they go out through north, and the cars also. And there is this big roundabout, which is a 20 meters diameter hole that brings air into this building, also here and here. And here, in between the beams of the big hall of the buses, we put all the administrations and equipments and services of the building. So these are little cameras made out of glass that are looking to the terminal as a mezzanine and looking to the park at the east, and somehow they live with this gallery where people are walking around to get their buses and their cars. Yeah, in this section is very important. You also see here that we had this 20 meters from the lowest part of the plot to the highest part of the plot, which is the level of the railway. We had 12 meters that gave us this opportunity to include here the terminal, which needs a big ceiling. And on the lowest part, we put the car park, and then this big park, natural park that goes with the topography, follows the topography, and here the services and all this air circulation. And then there is here a technical gallery, but this is the walking gallery looking to the park and looking to the terminal. And then the plan of landscape design, which was in the end the most important plan, and in the end also it expresses the idea that the building at least is like a kind of a surface that is on the back, and what is really important is the presence of this big park in the city. Okay, so I show you some pictures. You see here the entrance, the big hall, the gallery, the triangular space, and these buildings. And here this water pot that catches all the water that is coming with the topography, and it's catched here, and there is this kind of wood bridge that put people on the lowest level of the ground. Well, I show you some pictures. First, some pictures as far as the building was finished. It was with the park still not very grown, but you understand this portico that somehow defines this architectonic structure that at the same time has this industrial atmosphere, but in the other way it's also a very anonymous thing in a way. And then these more recent images also already with the building under with some life with the park growing. But you see in this picture is very clear with the topography and the presence of the trees that the building is like a scenario which is in a second plan, just passing. The entrance of the cars, the park, people, and here the old city. This picture is very nice because it shows the two levels of the building, with the car level and the people level and the gallery. This is the roundabout, which has 9 trees planted. It has the camellia, which is the tree of Oporto. I'm from Oporto. Every house of my family has a camellia in the garden. And in this view, you understand also this kind of topographic element, which is the terminal, to establish this kind of rule of the surfaces of the city. And it's also very clear here the new relation that this fragment can be made through this big infrastructure. Well, and then inside you see this is the pavilion of the big triangular pavilion for the buses, and the mezzanine for the services in between the beams. The big mouth of the north, where you have this where the buses go out, and also we ventilate because this last door has like 40 meters span. It's a lot of air that you can put inside the building, and in the end, it's like a covered plaza. It's like a covered street, let's say. But it also looks like a garage in a way, because it is a garage. But it has the idea of being, in the end, of being a big public space. Then there are different paths on other, you have other different possibilities of paths in the garden, because the garden is quite okay. It's not gigantic, but it's quite okay, big. and then the gallery. And the architecture is made out of this kind of repetitive element, which is this portico and this typology, this very classical reference of the portico, but always in this very tense relation with the nature. This is an example of one of these spaces, which is in the gallery in between glasses. On this side, you have the terminal, and on this side you have the view to the garden. Yeah, people. If you go there, there's a lot of people on this building. And then I asked to a friend of mine, which is a great artist, Francisco Tropa, to make an intervention. And he decided to put these statues, which are also a classical figure. It's Penelope, the wife of Ulysses, and he put them in this path where people crosses every day, and they somehow mixed with the people which is passing, and they mixed with the structure of the building and with the nature. And on the garden he put these two founts, which are also of the classical myth Danae. And they introduced the idea of water and of the sound of the water, which is very nice on this atmosphere. And then the highest gallery, which is nice because it gives you another level of understanding of the city. You see, the building is very poor. It's just on its bone because there was no means for more. It's just the structure and the infrastructure, the electrics and the water. Yeah, and then there is this north bridge that goes to the little palace that I decided to rebuild. And this is the lake of the water, where the water is drained, and with this wood bridge structure. Yeah, and in the end, you just see this, the building is much bigger, but in the end, you just see this kind of skeleton that organizes the urban space. And to finish, I will show you what I propose for this little palace that I could even throw down, but I decided to keep the building. It was extremely destroyed. Inside it was totally destroyed. There was no memory of his history. It was only the morphology of his main structure, which are the stones. So this is about a new function on the building, a modern function. I proposed that it would be an office building to the administration of this big equipment, and they are moving there now. So it was an idea that the municipality accepted. So this is the state of the building, which was very bad, very transformed. It was no longer this 19th century romantic palace. It was just a ruin, and inside it was totally destroyed. It was very changed, and worst of all, it had this very dramatic context situation where it was so close to all these infrastructures that it lost totally its sense, its historical sense. So I proposed that this building could be this extension of this park where you come out from this bridge, and I throw down all these walls that were around the building, but this I couldn't change. The highway, the railway, this ugly staircase. So I just tried to clean somehow this landscape, make it as an extension of the new park, and to give a new utilitarian and functional sense to the building. So I kept here, this photo, you see this dramatic distance to this infrastructure. How could someone make this to this old farm, but it was done. So our strategy was to keep what was really powerful in the building, which was the stone walls. We kept them all, we didn't touch them at all. And we put it an inside structure, very light, made out of masonry, which would sustain an horizontal structure of wood to make the ceilings and the floor plans and turn it into a utilitarian building. These buildings from the 19th century, as you know, were only used in the first floor, which was the piano nobile, let's say, and this ground floor was always used for storage and animals and all that. So they didn't have a staircase inside or bathrooms. So we had to make this new staircase, the bathrooms and an elevator for handicaps, because this was the entrance to the house for the second floor, for the first floor, because the ground floor was only working storage places. So you use the space as it was to make this kind of rooms. It's a succession of rooms, and to work, it's like an office building in open space. And this was the only room that was kept as it was in the 19th century, and with a big effort we tried to keep it. It had a very beautiful plaster ceiling, and we had some success to keep it. Then there was the church, the little chapel, which of course there was no longer a cult, so we decided to turn it into a little auditorium for meetings for these people, which is working here. Yeah, so as you see in these drawings, what these drawings show is that what we kept as essential was the stone elements of the morphology of the building, and all the rest, in a way, it's like a new building, a new utilitarian building, demanding the new regulations of thermical, everything for an office building. So he has this very dramatic situation with the highway, which somehow is kind of surrealistic. If you imagine that this was one of these English old farms from Porto. Yeah. You see this? So the dialogue between this infrastructure and these elements, and the old building, we rebuilt this fountain here, and we teared down the walls so we had some space to breathe. And we didn't touch the outside walls at all. We didn't touch. So here you see in this section this very light structure made out of wood, and these masonry walls with isolation, thermal isolation, that sustain this new wood structure. So it's like a light box structure inside this old stone structure. You see the wood beams, the new wall with plaster, the new staircase, and these are the rooms, which are just an open space with the wood structure and the old windows as they were. But in a way, in some details, it still has this memory of this old English farm that was once. Yeah, you see this structure of wood? This is all made out of wood, very light. This is the top floor with the new roof, also made out of wood. It's all new because there was nothing inside. And here you see the old room that we kept, the elements that we could kept, which is this, beautiful. And this big room in open space, which is made out of the geometry space between the old stone walls. And here you see the chapel was here on this level, but when we arrived there was this floor was destroyed, so we realized that this space had some potential. It had some monumentality, and we decided to make this auditorium with a glass roof. And it's no longer a chapel, but it has the atmosphere of a chapel, which is this space. You can also walk directly to the auditorium coming from the terminal, from the garden. And also very light structure. This is made with aluminium and wood, and the stones has been kept as they were, as found. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nuno, for this presentation. We would now have a moment to discuss, and I would like to invite you to ask questions. I will start with the first question, then I will just point into the audience and say you. It's like in a circus. Where you always have to avoid to be in the first row, because you never know if somebody says you, and then you have to hold your head under the foot of an elephant. And this circus metaphor association, of course, comes to me because I was visiting the terminal this morning, and was excited and relaxed. Both. I'm always a little bit afraid of bus terminals because you have to be very careful not to be run over. You are disoriented. It's too hot. It's too dark. It's pickpockets. You miss the bus. So it's kind of a place which generates nightmares even while you're still awake. Huh? And in your design, I felt totally safe because I felt I can orient myself. You have this gallery which is not at all frightening, because you can kind of see what's coming. And I also felt that the pedestrians, the people waiting for the bus, the people luggage, they all felt quite relaxed. It's easy to orient, and it's also very relaxing that you have this small park which is there if you miss the bus, or if you have to wait for the bus. And in a way, the buses are also happy. They have their space. They can take their rest. They come out of this hole and go into the hole. So it's a feeling as if this had been a landscape which had been always, used for this cohabitation of buses and pedestrians and cars. And then I wondered, how do you manage this side about the joints? This moment where one movement turns into the other. No? There is different changes of scenery, changes of space, changes of of movement, direction. How did you decide where this is, and how did you design those?
Well, thank you for your beautiful description of the building and critique. It was very nice. Well, these joint moments. Well, the building doesn't have detail, let's say, because there was no chance for detail. But I'm an architect who loves details, but in this building I couldn't achieve it. So, in a way, the detail of the building in its scale, which is another dimension, at least for me, because I'm used to do smaller buildings and houses, I think that the detail of the building is this kind of moments where the building somehow has this, I didn't say changes, but kind of subtle movement. Because in a way the building is a line, and then there are these kind of little moments, the accesses, the elevators, the staircases, these kind of little moments where the alignments move to, and they move because they have to adapt to the detail of the topography, let's say. Because one thing is your gesture in the drawing, which can be like a very abstract and continuous movement, but then when you go to the process of the execution, you then have to be very rigorous and to somehow understand where these gestures as to fall somehow, to adapt, to be somehow flexible with the condition of the place, which is the existing elements, the existing objects, the infrastructural objects that were in the place, like the railway station, for instance. And Porto is a very complicated city in terms of topography. It's a very irregular. It's characterized by a very irregular topography, and there's only one way to deal with it, is to have a kind of a dialogue with this type of topography. So you have to adapt somehow. Mm-hmm. And this was the detail of the project, I think.
Yeah. Perhaps another question before I start this. Oh no, I cannot. Okay, thank you. First, yeah, please.
Okay. Why the exit of the cars is in the entrance of the buses?
Why the exit of the cars is in the entrance of the buses?
Yes.
That's the question.
Yes. Because the cars need to wait until the all buses enter the gates.
Yeah, there is the cars. There were two possibilities for the cars to go out. There was to come again to the roundabout and go through the east mouth, and then there is the possibilities that they go out through north, through the open to north. And in the beginning, or till now, they decided to make this more. The administration of the building, and it's something that I don't control, decided to use the east roundabout, and now they are going to change so the cars go out through north, so they don't conflict with the buses, because the building had an increase of use of 200%.
Okay, thank you.
An incredible detail which I find no typological precedent is the toilets. and toilets are usually not the most pleasant place in bus terminals. But I found that you approach them, and then there is a glass wall where you can see the sinks. And behind that there is the toilets, which then kind of go to the bus area. And when I was approaching the toilet, there was a lady kind of walking into the men's toilet, but then her friend could kind of signal to her while she was already in there that she was at the wrong place, and she could kind of come out again. So the whole procedure was not embarrassing, but kind of transparent, like a little theater place. Is there any? How did you get to the idea to arrange a toilet like this?
Well, my idea was that my idea was about this. My idea about these places, about these spaces that are in between the beams, which are once toilets, once a cafe, once an administration room, once a storage room, once whatever, is that they would be treated in a homogeneous way. Which is to say, transparent with same dimension, and people will pass, and independently of the function, they would have always the same kind of architectural and space expression.
Please, Andre.
Hi, thank you for your thorough explanation of this project. It was really enjoyable to watch. I especially like the reference to Galfetti and the idea of that line bringing simplicity and clarity to an otherwise chaotic urban situation. So, really enjoyed that reference. I have a question that is admittedly somewhat marginal to the project, but not entirely. It's still pertinent enough to ask the question. You showed an intriguing picture where people had carved out their own path in the mound, the park area. And I wonder how you, as author of the project, react to that, let's call it feedback from the users. So is this something that your project was originally ready to accept, to embrace, or is it something that makes you revisit the project, maybe in a critical way, or just discovering a new aspect of your project? What could you say about that?
Yeah, I think it's, I really think it's beautiful. Really, I think it's beautiful that people make these paths, and we just will keep them because it's beautiful. And in a way, the park, as you see, the park has no big design. It just has this parallel path, which is parallel to the gallery, and it has nothing else. In a way, so that people could use it in an indifferent way. So, and then, of course, this is very common that in an irregular topography and difficult topography to walk, people will discover more easy path to cross. And I would say that is what we call something that you cannot design. It's beautiful to keep it. If you start designing that, it will be a disaster. Or to correct that, it will be a disaster. So the building is a kind of, it has these very strict rules, but then the rest is like freestyle, let's say.
The roof, the triangular roof of the bus area is kind of a terrain vague. No, it's also it's close to the railway tracks. You can look at it, but you cannot enter it. Was there ever an idea to make it accessible, or is this conceptually from the beginning an image?
No. The roof was always thought as a safe distance area for the pedestrians, safe distance areas to the railway. So you can see it. It has this atmosphere that continues the park, but you cannot go walk there. It was always thought as that. It's like this safe distance, but with a pleasant look.
And of course, the budget was limited, but the rotunda is obviously also a central element because it brings light into the lower level and air, and it takes away the cave atmosphere. Was there ever an attempt to have a direct access in the rotunda for pedestrians, or was it always like a fountain where you can look in if you wish?
No, it was. This rotunda is made to. The rotunda is made to regulate the traffic, and it was not. It's also a place to look and to put air inside the building, and to put a natural light inside the building, but not to be walked.
Do we have time for more questions, or is there a break, or I'm lost? 10 minutes more. You. Tom. Yeah.
Now we are going to oblige them.
Thank you, Philip. Maybe I'm going to recycle a question from earlier on, because it's actually one that I wanted to kind of throw into the next session as well. It was, I think, somebody at the back there quoted 10. So we're trying to tie the whole thing together. Reinforcing the territory with form, which was the comment that was attributed to you. And I was wondering whether that's something, whether there is an element of kind of, let's say, or a shared value in that statement. It seems like it could apply to your project just as much as it came from 10. The kind of the reinforcement of the territory with form, the line, the kind of topography. And I was wondering how would you pick up that thought and describe it in relation to your project? How would you describe, how would you process that idea in relation to your project? The line that came from 10, that they reinforce the territory with form. Form.
Sorry, that's a very bad question.
It's my accent.
It's not your fault. Well, I would say that is the main question of architecture, no? It's to it's to, I mean, we give sense to the space, we give sense to society, let's say, through space and form. That is not to say that form, it's a kind of achievement in a first glance or in a first it's not the first achievement, let's say, but it's a consequence of this process of giving a sense to the city, the space, and to people. So, but I think in a way it's the architectural process and its main goal, I think. Doesn't mean that we achieve it every day, but we keep trying Yeah.
Thank you. The next question goes to Felipe.
No, I'm going to ask a question that I already asked Nuno in another place, but if you had more money and you had a chance to detail more, what would you detail more in a building like this?
One what?
You said that there was no money for detail.
Ah.
If you had the money for detail, what would you detail in a building like this?
If I had, I'd make these bricks in stone. In granite. Really. If I had money, I would have made these bricks in stone. In granite. Grey granite. But I had no money. I had to make it in cement. No, because there is another thing which is important here. It is a typological thing, which is, you know, for me, Porto is the grey city, is the grey and black city. It's my memory of the city. And now with you know, this tourist thing is turning into a colorful kind of crazy thing that I don't recognize my own city. So the building had to be grey. So, but I would like to make this grey with the stone of the city, which is the granite. So my answer to your question is, if I had money, I would have make these blocks made out of grey stone, granite.
No. As you didn't have money to use brick and granite. Okay.
If you divide 13 million, make this exercise. Okay. Divide 30 million euros through 50,000 square meters.
Yeah. But you were, of course, your reference was the Galfetti's project. That line that connects several different episodes. Here, because of the materials too, there is some reminiscence of the Caesar's aqueduct in Évora. Is this something that I was making up, or is it also a reference for you?
Yeah, it was. Especially when especially at the moment that I realized that I didn't have money to use granite. Then I looked at this beautiful aqueduct of Caesar and I said, okay, we can use these cement blocks and it will be beautiful, it will be poor, but people will remember this aqueduct of Caesar, which is nice. It's a good reference. Yeah, of course. But it was a second moment. It was in a second moment. Yes, of course. And thank you for the question.
You will get one, but I would like to first ask my former doctoral student, Luis, who wrote a beautiful dissertation on the promenade architecturale in James Sterling's work. So, Luis, what would your question be? I know you tried to escape because you probably knew that I was going to ask you.
Thank you, Philip. You know me well, so you watch me escape, but come back again. I don't really have a question, but I want to congratulate Nuno for the project. I think it's a really nice building and one which is very unique and radical at the same time. And that's it. Hence my appreciation. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Shall we have one more? Or no? Okay, this is just a perfect conclusion. Many thanks again, big applause to Nuno for this wonderful project.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for coming back. We will restart, and to reconvene the session, I will ask Tom Emerson to join me at the table, and also Rui, if you can join me. So this is the last stretch, and I hope you have all the beautiful questions ready for the end. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you all for returning. I just wanted to just add another note of thanks to the introductory remarks earlier on. I was reminded, because I have a very nice bag, that this event is supported by Panorama, who also, we just want to say thank you and for a wonderful lunch in Matosinhos in their factory. Which is actually quite an amazing place, designed, new building by Souto de Moura, so well worth a visit. Another architectural reason to go to Matosinhos. I know that Nemanja now must be the only architect alive who has been to Matosinhos but has never seen Caesar's pools. That's a very rare. Anyway, we're coming on to Studiolo or Rui's practice. I don't have an extensive introduction to make because we know each other socially. We share an office in Zurich, where Rui teaches. I know that he was educated in Coimbra, which is, I think, one of the other really important schools, or the ones that is really kind of in our consciousness outside of Portugal, notably people like Paulo Providencia, who I believe taught you, another amazing architect from this city. And I just had to ask Rui where his practice is actually based, because I didn't know. I think Rui is one of these architects who really embodies this kind of bridge between Switzerland and Portugal, which I mentioned earlier on, and I think hopefully we'll be able to try and tease out what that really means in terms of architecture over the next 45 minutes or so. Yeah, and I think I'm finding this, it's a great honor to be able to kind of share the platform with Rui, particularly in teasing out this thematic exchange, this sort of between Switzerland and Portugal, as an outsider to both. And I think that that's somehow also interesting, because I'm neither Portuguese nor Swiss, but somehow feel connected to your work and actually all the Portuguese architects, but also to 10. So Rui, over to you, and let's see how, what was the line again? How you reinforce the territory with form. Over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you really for the introduction. I also want to thank the present friends, and also, of course, to General Counsel Gonçalo and to Joanna for inviting me, and also to the University of Porto to host this event. I must say that, like Tom said, I'm a student from Coimbra and from ETH-Zürich in Madrid. I never was a student here. I also never really taught officially at this school, but I had the pleasure to spend several summers here teaching at Porto Academy, and it was always a great pleasure. Today I think we are here to symbolize this connection between Portugal and Switzerland, and that event was always a bridge to several cultures, and it was extremely important to me. I had the pleasure to teach with several Swiss architects, so I like to imagine schools as open spaces where we meet and where we enjoy the idea of being architects. The lecture is somehow divided into moments. One I will read. I hope it's not too annoying, but after these two previous beautiful lectures, it's maybe like a kind of a moment to have a nap. And then I will show 3 projects. And also, contrary to the previous lectures, none of these projects is built. 2 are competitions that we lost, and 1 is a project that will hopefully start to be built soon. First, before I actually start, Tom was asking about this idea of being a Portuguese architect in Switzerland, but also of being here. And I must say I moved to Switzerland right away after graduating, so I never really worked in Portugal before, and to be a Portuguese architect in Switzerland was always quite well seen. I must say that the way I was taught and prepared, it was quite welcomed. So I right away discovered that to be a Portuguese architect in Switzerland was quite good. Now that I'm oscillating between the two countries and most of the practices actually occurring in Portugal, I'm still to understand what does it mean, my Swiss experience here. So I don't know yet how valuable it is. And I show you this disc from the kind of quite known singer Roberto Leal. He was a Portuguese born in Portugal, but his parents immigrated quite early to Brazil, sorry. And he always said that for him it was super strange because in Brazil everyone would say that he was Portuguese, but in Portugal he said that he was Brazilian. Sometimes I feel a bit like that. So in Switzerland people tell that the work I do is quite Portuguese, and here people say that my work is quite Swiss. So maybe it's something to also discuss after. Maybe you, Tom, that are not Portuguese or Swiss, you can tell me if my work is more Swiss or more Portuguese. So ways of working, I'll just put this a bit like here, ways of working. This is a little bit just an introduction since it's such a young and small practice, maybe it's easier to understand how we work. Right? Yeah, so we could say that the work we do fundamentally seeks to combine two aspects, the development and exploration of the relationship between landscape and the built environment, as well as the fusion of the physical and immaterial heritage of the site where the projects will unfold and its connection to the history of architecture and art. First, our profession deals with tangible and real issues. We must think about what, how, when, and whether to build. There are economic factors to respect, laws and market pressures that constantly shape the work, as well as clients, good or bad, each with their own visions and desires. Architecture seems also to bear the responsibility of addressing the climatic and sociological crisis of our time, and I believe we do have a role to play. However, for me, these dimensions of the profession, which play a fundamental role, are nothing more than parameters to consider, issues seeking answers that must be resolved or incorporated into the working process. The projects I will show today are responses to specific problems and requests. They deal with, or better yet engage with, the common issues I previously mentioned. Despite this, the work is not defined, nor is it aimed to be defined as a mere sum of these factors. I believe the architect's role is fundamentally to breathe soul into the buildings that solve problems and fulfill needs, to allow oneself to dream of things that are not yet present, to speak of beauty and other aesthetic dimensions. Architecture is an intellectual profession. There's no architecture without ideas. There is no architecture without a story behind to tell. The work we develop tries to consider both interior and exterior with equal attention, housing the context not as a defining element of the project, but as part of it. Perhaps attempting to shift the very Portuguese paradigm of the solution lies in the site to the site is part of the solution. Lightning Field is an installation by the artist Walter de Maria from 1977, which we believe exemplifies this premise that underpins our practice. In the site, west central New Mexico, numerous thunderstorms occur, especially between May and September, at a rate at about 3 to 30 in days. A composition of 400 polished stainless steel posts arranged in a rectangular grid and spaced regularly rest in a highly horizontal landscape. The geometry is, of course, a fundamental part of the piece. The physical nature of the object enhances the capture of lightning, intensifying the experience of contemplating the storms. The object acts as an amplifier of the qualities or potential of the site in a symbiotic relation. The land is not the setting for the work, but the part of the work, said de Maria. We are certainly very interested in this idea of objects that emphasize the qualities and dimensions of a place. The capture of lightning is not the only device resulting from the dichotomy between landscape and intervention. All the posts reach the same height, each of them at a specific height. The small topographical variations are thus diluted, reinforcing the sense of horizontality of the place, but also its expansive character, in a scale closer to the experiences of the sublime in a Burkean sense, in a scene that could have been painted by Caspar David Friedrich. While each object stands as a singular and independent, where if it not the post symbolically representing a vertical line akin to a unit, the relationship between it and its peers and the site also reveals signs of symbiosis and cohabitation. These contrasts between landscape and built elements are portrayed here in these plural relationships, where coexistence creates possibilities for interpretation and understanding. These are ideas that continuously inform our working process. Prioritizing continuity between the built and unbuilt, between object and landscape, is a permanent goal, giving equal importance to each world and believing that from their friction, a specific energy like those lightnings might arise. In addition to the physical heritage of the places we intervene in, we also like to consider the histories and memories lived there. A logical order where the past emerges as a kind of fuel that allows the project to move forward, giving form or presence in some way to the absence in the form of the previous experiences. Each project is a body that materializes and gives form to a number of stories and lived situations. In 1972, Mata Clark exhibited Walls, a series of photographs showing buildings with their facades removed, revealing the complex and rich interiors. These observations demonstrated Mata Clark's social interest and claimed the metropolis as a canvas in action, or better, canvas for action. While the images exhibit a set of scars from occupation, traces made of debris and wallpaper that aesthetically opposed to the then dominant expressive abstractionism, thought to directly evoke associative image with which each observer could relate. We are somehow interested in creating these associations, a kind of architectural density created with and through these traces. In the Tukuk project, the transformation of a house into a restaurant, the first floor of the house is converted into the main dining room. The small divisions disappear to give way to a spacious and generous area. The memory of the domestic scale takes shape in the floor, which, through the reuse of the old hydraulic cement tiles, draws a kind of a rug that highlights the former typological organization. In addition to the relation with the site and the histories it contains, there is also the interest in the history of architecture and art. The goal is to produce architecture of its time, but as T.S. Eliot defined in Tradition and Individual Talent from 1919, placing importance on cultural continuity, referring to previous examples that, as references, assists, like a cane, in the slow and winding paths the project process often takes. Like any tool, this reference serves to facilitate, improve, and expedite the process, but are never the result in themselves. The work of Jeff Wall can, in many dimensions, exemplify what we have been now explaining so far. Picture for Woman from 1979 is one of the artist's first and most iconic photographs. The piece consists in a large photograph printed on a cyberchrome transparency inside a fluorescent light box. The foreground of the image shows the photographer himself on the right, triggering a large format camera with a cable release. The image of the photographer and the camera, which occupies the central area of the frame, appear to be reflected and returned by a large mirror that extends along the length of one of the walls of the room. To the left of the image is a young woman, posed enigmatically and conventionally, her gaze directly at the camera lens. The presence of two vertical bars visually divides the image into three, as if it were a triptych. The scene takes place in an elongated room with parquet floors. Chairs are visible in the background, and a work table is placed near a long radiator beneath windows. The environment evokes a classroom setting within an educational institution. The walls, covered in rough stucco, reveal the electrical installation. Several lights are mounted on the ceiling in a regular arrangement, lighting the room uniformly and structuring the depth of the image with their light. We witness a kind of carefully orchestrated interplay of gazes. The photographers, who activates the shutter, the woman who poses and looks directly at the lens and thus at us, and the gaze of the camera positioned on its tripod in the center of the image. We are particularly interested in how, with this photograph, Wall begins to make explicit references to some of the most famous examples of the 19th century classical painting. This image, as the author states, was inspired by Manet's painting Un bar aux Folies Bergère from 1982. In this painting, we see a barmaid behind the counter during a night at Folies Bergère. A mirror behind her reflects not only her image, but also of the audience and the artist who stands on the opposite side of the counter, to the right of the painting. Wall's work is rich in these relationships between the result and a series of references or tributes, as Wall has called them at times. This interest in what precedes us, what we admire and what we learn from, is not something that should or could limit or constrain our practice. We are interested in ensuring that the work we develop can correspond to contemporary questions, adopting an expression of its time. In this sense, returning to Picture of a Woman is interesting. From a social-cultural standpoint, and following G.F. Chevrier's interpretation, Picture of a Woman problematizes the man-woman relationship. However, this relationship is not told from the perspective of the alienation of the Parisian bars at the end of the 19th century, as in Manet's painting. In fact, Folies Bergère was a place of luxury, gallantry, and prostitution, reducing the woman to an object. On the contrary, in Wall's photographic painting, the camera itself occupies a central place, assuming the position of the female model. The man's gaze is directed toward the woman via the machine, leaving the man at the service of the latter. The woman, for her part, turns her back on the photographer, her gaze direct at the viewer in independent attitude. She's an actress, a performer, a conscious protagonist of the scene, and not absent as in Manet. Thus, the work acquires an educational vocation. It shares with us, through the artistic tradition of representing women, a role that evolved through the 20th century in search of independence and autonomy. Similar situations are not also, of course, unfamiliar to the discipline of architecture itself. Mies van der Rohe, despite yielding of the temptation of classical interest, displaying the admitted fascination he had for Schinkel Doric columns, ended up inventing a cruciform column that he managed to refine. The composition of an assembly of 4 corner profiles covered with mirror chrome on one side recalls the discipline's tradition in one of its most fundamental elements, while simultaneously negating it through the mirrored reflection, making the column disappear. All of this made possible by contemporary possibilities and giving form to pertinent artistic questions. The column was dear to him, but it was necessary to find a contemporary form for it. In this journey, through Wall's work, helps to demonstrate an ideological position. We are also interested in understanding how these ideas take form and what the physical dimensions of the resources we apply in our office research are. The context in which our work develops accepts the economic limitations of commissions, embraces the energetic crisis constraints and the natural elements not as obstacles or limitations, but always as opportunities for design. Thus, there are no materials that are more or less noble, nor resources excluded a priori. Everything can be valid if there's an idea behind it, and at a time when manual construction seems less prepared and capable than in the past, it seems more interesting to look in other directions rather than insist on a language limited to a few interpreters. In this sense, we are drawn to the work of Philly de Barlow, who employs everyday materials in her sculptures. Barlow began experimenting early in her career with sculptural potential of non-traditional materials such as fiberglass, resin, fabric, paint, wood, plaster, concrete, cardboard, stripes or fabric, or even colored tape, former extraordinary handmade structures that expose a stunning variety of new sculptural forms. This departure is an opportunity, but also a reflection of the context in which the artist operates. For us, the form it takes and the figure itself are of greater interest than the material or the program. Materiality is merely a way to physically realize an idea, and we reject any material fascism. Painting a sky in blue can be as a physical act as suspending a ceiling. We could therefore say that construction nostalgia is for us of little interest. Again, there is no architecture without ideas, so not every construction is architecture, and not all architecture is already built. The work does find a possible path between what is on site, what is on us, what we discover through the project process. The projects are the result of these constellations. Okay, sorry, now it will be a bit more fun. Okay, so to start, I will try to be not too long. I will show 3 projects. The first one is, it's called To Dwell 2. It's a competition, and it was a competition in Portugal. It's actually the only competition we ever did in Portugal. If there are students here present, I don't advise you to take too much notes. We were last, so it's not a good project, probably. And it's in Lisbon. It was for a... Yes, let's say it like that. It's in Lisbon, and it was for a cooperative housing in quite close to the pavilion of Sporting Club Portugal in Alvalade. And of course, Lisbon, as most of the cities in Europe, it's also affected by the climate crisis and by the heat island effect. And we started really with this observation that most of the issues surrounding the site, the plot is it there? Yeah. The plot is there. Okay, and now today it serves as a parking lot, and most of the area around, exception made to some trees, it's quite sealed. We must imagine that even these fields here, they are actually sealed underground. So there was a really, it's quite a big issue, no? And we decided to start by this analyze, and our proposal was right away to unseal the max we could, and to really create a different type of environment. So. We made an analysis of, we sometimes think about cities in a way that we think about the cars and the infrastructure and about the people, but still in cities there's quite strong environments, and there's a lot of life that occurs. So we started to analyze what were the fauna and flora that were around, and how could we try to also create spaces where these plants and these animals could also live, and not only necessarily thinking about the people. So we decided we'd return to a project that, of course, is quite dear to everyone, and what we thought it was quite interesting was in Unité d'Habitation de Marseille, it's still a quite sustainable project. It's a bar, it's set between two quite strong gardens, cross ventilation, you have both views, you have light coming from both sides. So for us, it was quite clear right away, because of the plot situation, that we would want to create two gardens where the house, so no matter in which division of the house you would be, or the apartment, you would always have a kind of a green background. So this is what we proposed. Here you can see in the outside we really proposed a garden, and on the interior of the courtyard we could not, of course, because of the parking demands, we could not have big trees, but we proposed a kind of a recreation garden where some smaller trees could grow, and we recovered all the water of the rain from this point that we could then later reintroduce in a more complex system that I will not explain you because it takes so much time, but we could reuse the water inside of the house. So here you see our main decision was to push the entrance of the parking lot to down of the building, also to create all the parking spots for the city in the lower area, and then we could really somehow occupy the northern part of the plot with a garden that it's still public, that it's for the community. And that is then in relation with the public program that we proposed, the cafe, and then inside people could have their own garden for recreation, and where water gardens were also proposed, and also with fruit trees. So here you can more or less see the implementation. And the site was quite particular in this sense. We were ending the block, so this courtyard would stay open. We were not allowed to open any windows to the northern part, so it was an east-west building. But at the same point, nevertheless, and sometimes law is a bit unfair in this sense, we think we cannot open the windows but in the northern facade, but it's actually the facade that it's more perceived, because it's the one that you have always more distance to look at. So this was a quite strong theme for us, because somehow it seemed quite and lost opportunity first, but also negligency to not really draw it properly. And although it was, so we are always aiming to try to make something that has a certain freshness, but also that it somehow relates to the site and to the culture. So we were looking a lot to the culture of the tiles. First, because it's of course something that in Portugal there's a quite tradition on the production, and there's this beautiful book from José Carlos Lareira about the tile, and not a bit far, but still in the same city, still in Lisbon, there's this project Raços Bragança that we always liked it a lot, not necessarily for its form, but Lisbon has this beautiful light, and the tiles have always this capacity to reflect light in different ways if the light is higher or lower, so the facade would also change a bit. And also the way that the stone that absorbs more light could then mark certain elements on the facade. So that's what we propose. The building that it's on red, it was an existing building, and it had these projected bay windows. We really took this as a kind of an element, and we continued it. And so it's a quite simple structure. We had to maximize, in order to maximize the floor height, the building height, we make a super compact building with slabs of 20 centimeters in order that we could then add a last attica floor. But nevertheless, we thought that we took the theme of the bay window, but the small building was not strong enough to conditionate the organization of our floors. So it's a bit like a painting. You know, you have stripes, and sometimes the stripes are matching and sometimes are not matching. On the ground floor, the tiles were not blue, were yellow in order to mark this idea of the entrance in the Café Bicicleta. That was our proposition, a cafe where you could repair your bike, also somehow trying to awaken for the idea of the sweet mobility in cities. Returning to the facade that we were speaking now, so when you have to make a facade, and Cesar has so many lectures and so many texts about how to open a window, and he used to explain how fascinated he was by looking at Adolf Loos' plans and the way he thought that the window could be open. It's also more hard, or at least is a theme. How can you make a facade when you have no windows, when no one really cares about it because it's somehow a blank facade? And how could you still transmit something? And then for us, it's a painting that it's quite important at a practice and that we love a lot, from Frank Stella. And in this painting, when I first saw it in New York, I realized that the perception of the painting is changing constantly. So from far, the first thing I saw, but maybe I also don't see that well, I saw a black square on the white canvas. And then as I was closer, I started to understand all this configuration of the lines. And depending on the way I would look at the painting, there would be different centers of gravitation. So sometimes I would feel that the center of the painting was here, but sometimes I would feel that the center of the painting was here and directing me to this point. So this was, for us, it was quite interesting how with certain stripes and lines you could introduce so much density into a plan. And so we tried to somehow start to work with it. We could have windows on the attica by making a step back of the facade, but on the lower part it was purely composition, because it's for us like a stage. No, it's like we try to make a painting is actually what we are trying to do. Not that we consider to be artists, but we are just trying. And this is the facade we proposed. So there's like fake windows. It's just with the tiles. And also, if we imagine that sometimes, again, with the difference of the day, the light will have a different initiation on the facade. Sometimes you would see this you would see quite well the yellow squares, and sometimes you would see much more like as an absence of it. And in the end, we made a model for the competition, and later our good friends from FAUP said that it was totally wrong to make models in competitions in Portugal, so we were not aware. Maybe now we will do different next time. But we made a model that would try to demonstrate, like I think we can understand the idea that the bay window would then continue with these other bay windows, the stripes of the Leos stone that would somehow weave with the context, and then this strong face. And to the back, we proposed a kind of a balcony facade where every tenant could be in relation with the garden. So even if you are not in the garden, you can always watch your kids playing with your neighbors. And so there's a kind of a more private world. Then we also know that this is something that it's maybe probably common in Portugal, in Switzerland. You don't win competitions with facades, you win competitions with floor plans. And it was there was a lot of pressure to make good housing, so the surfaces were really, the square meters were really low. So it was an invitation for us, and it's the first project of a series that then investigates this. How can you make a house, or how do we understand space? And we realized that the measure of space is not necessarily, the perception of space is not necessarily a rational one. It's not necessarily according to the amount of square meters, but it's according, in our perspective, to two main things. First is the length of the eye So how far can you see? And this gives a certain size. So in this room that is quite generous, the window also gives us the perception that the space is even bigger. And the second one, and maybe the most interesting one in a plan, is how you walk. And if you walk in a house and you arrive in a dead end and you step back, then your brain reads the space with a certain size. If you can walk without coming back, then you always have a different sensation, a sensation of bigger generosity. And Villa Lac for us is an example for that. So it's a super small house. I will not explain too much because it's like one of the recent masterpieces of architecture. But what we find really interesting is this core. That when you enter, that you can always circulate here where there was the bed, even the bathroom has the relation with the fenêtre longueur, and then we can always walk around this core. Also from the outside, then we can go to his office. So, by making this, Corbusier makes that the experience of the house, you never really experience that it's a small house, although it's a super tiny house, between the big perception constructed with a long window and also with this way of walking in the house. So we tried to do that, something like this. It's a flat, it's totally different, of course, but we propose that we have two facades that are super open and walls, and then between these walls you could always walk around. And also it was important to guarantee that, if it's Sunday and it's Sunday roast, smells a lot, that the kitchen also then could be closed. And if it's the bathroom, then you could also close it, but you could also leave in an open plan if you wish. So this is our plan. And as you can see, I will not enter into much detail, but you can always have an access. The bathroom is also thought as a part of the daily life. We try to open the space in order that the people that inhabit really occupy it in a free way. So in our house, when our kids are having a bath, it makes part of the everyday. It's open doors. So we live most of the times with open doors. And to give 5.6 square meters to a place that it's not part of the enfilade, of the constellation of the house, it just seemed a missed opportunity. So even the bathroom is part of the house, and as you can see, most of the times you can really circulate. I'll just make one quick. So you could always, for example, enter here, go through the bathroom, wash your hands, leave your clothes on the laundry, be in the kitchen. You are already in relation with the activity in the main room. This is more like a joker room, but you can always also have it then as an office, come back, come from here, balcony, and this also occurs in all the other apartments. And this for us, it was really like a super pragmatic way also of building because it was much more economical. There would be areas which would be with generous windows because of this idea of having this light. And this is a painting by Marie Kors, American artist that we like a lot. She uses like painting that normally you use in highways in order that it reflects. So when you look at the painting, it really like sends light. So for us, it was a bit like what we were trying to do. There's areas where there's a lot of light, the common areas, and then there's areas where you are more private, like in the rooms. So there you have a little bit less light, smaller windows. And this is a little bit how the space would somehow look with this possibility of closing and opening. Also, one thing we tried is that the system is rational, and it's because it was a cooperative. We tried that it's possible that the conjugation or the constellation of the flats change. So this is a little bit the possibility. So you could always still, if, for example, you would need this room and this flat has one room available, then you could put a door and have it for yourself. So all these are, you could have like 1, 2, 3, 4 T2s, but you could also make studios. So because it was a cooperative, it would be possible to negotiate this. And if you live with if your kids leave the house and you no longer need so much space, and you could also reduce the surface and also the rent by doing this, and also giving the possibility to your neighbor to have more space. Normally, the challenge of also making a house that is not a high-rise like the 10 ones, but that there's a certain segregation. You enter in the lift, you go home, you don't see anyone. So we decided to put public programs on the ground floor and on the top floor. So the common room and the laundry are on the top floor. The laundry is actually the best place to have it because we had a water tank of the recovering of the water, and then we could use this filtered water right away directly there. And on the ground floor, we had the cafe and a kind of a rentable area for for the kids and to make birthdays, and also two guest rooms because the flats are not too big, and if you have someone visiting you, you could always use them. So here it's a bit the plan that try to promote a little bit the relation with the garden. And on the top floor we have 2 special apartments that are slightly smaller, and then we always like to imagine that if there's a party of the building, so you could also use a bit the nice laundry space with the balconies. So we try to make a system where this space would be possible to use in continuity, and then there's some equipments to somehow help out. Yeah, and this is a little bit the way we could imagine this space, also with the balcony and the vision to the garden. And when there's lights out, it ends. And with that, we go to the next project. That it's a competition, and like I said, we were last in this competition, so again, maybe notes are not recommended. This was a competition we did in Switzerland, also for housing. We were not last in this one. And it's in Basersdorf. It's a small village close to Zurich, and there was the proposal. So here there was a site. This is This is the site, and it was a house where a priest was living. And because the community could not really afford to build a new house for the priest, it was super degraded, it was no possible to keep it. We asked for the plans, the existing plans, in order to try to make something, but it was impossible to really work with the existing house. So in the solution they found economically was to make a bigger building where the priest would then get one of the flats, and they would use the other 5 flats that would be sold as an investment to pay for. So they would take that money and then pay for the house of the priest. And in the site there was, it was a super beautiful site. There's a forest on the top, and there was these 4 beautiful trees that were recommended to keep. And we decided not only to keep those 4, but to keep all the trees on site. That was the premise of the project. Because we could not keep the house, we decided that the trees would be our starting point. That would be our material to work with. So we liked it to imagine how, like I was explaining in the beginning, how could we make an architecture that necessarily does not come to impose itself, but also valorizes what's on site. And we like a lot this painting from the Austrian painter Klimt, where you see this, it's a restaurant close to a lake, and where we really liked this painting because the house sits on the middle. So somehow all the green and the lake reflects the green, somehow everything gravitates around the house, which also gives a quite big importance to the house. At the same point, without the house, we wouldn't perceive the scale of the trees, we wouldn't perceive that there's a lake because there would not be a reflection. So the house, again, a little bit like compared to the work of Di Maria, at least in my point of view, acts as a catalyzer, or has a kind of a way to reinforce the quality of the nature. So we wanted to do a house like that. Not running also always from architecture, to go around the tree was super important, and this is one of our favorite projects from Exagnemichon, the plywood house from 85, where they make this extension of this house and the super simple building, and they really fold. It's almost like the tree would push the house. So the nature is not adapting, the house is adapting to the nature, to the conditions of the site. And this seemed, according to our will of keeping the trees, this seemed a quite interesting strategy. So that's what we started to try to do. We started to imagine how the house would fold around the existing trees. And as you can see, this is a bit like the site plan. And all the trees, we drew all the trees of the site as the Erzogen and the Miron tree. It was an homage. And you see all the trees now are exactly where they were. And then the trees are folding 2 times the house. So it's a simple square, rectangle, and then it's folded on the corners by these trees. It was a quite strong, heavy law, super complex. So the law said we needed to make a certain amount of apartments, 6, more an office, and then we only could build 2 floors and more than 1 attica. But there was a particular law that said that all floors that are more than 60 centimeters up from the natural existing terrain are considered a level. So if, for example, we would have made a flat building, then we would have lost one floor because the garage would be considered a floor, a main floor, and not a garage. So we had to make a kind of a split level house, and this was a challenge also. And it was quite funny to imagine how a lift works on a split level house in such a small building. So the house for us was a little bit like this Japonica, this beautiful retreated in this Carl Bosfeld picture. There was this. We thought that maybe we need an element that articulates this two heights. So here you see in the model we have a kind of a spine in the middle, which is this vertical green line, and then the stripes are just coming from it. And together with the homage together with the reference of Carl Bosfeld in these trees that were existing on the site, somehow in our mind it seemed that we were making also a tree house, and this made sense. The floor plan, it's also dealing with these ideas that I was explaining before, although it's a different context, it's not so urban. So we had 270 degrees of opening. There was 2 apartments. And the lower one was for the priest. It was a bigger apartment, also with some representative areas, but nevertheless, you can still see a bit this investigation. So there's still areas where you can always walk and cross and then leave and then come again. And so ideas that we find interesting in order to potentiate the size of the apartments. Also, one of the discoveries was this kind of spine also in the middle of the plan where the lift articulates the 2 heights without being in a kind of a box. So when you would open the lift, if sometimes you could even almost see your neighbor on the upper part. And yeah, this is a vision of the priest apartment with this relation in all the senses, and we thought that the chimney would be a great way to symbolize this rurality. On the attica, we need to step back, but we still make 2 apartments that are slightly different, but yeah, keep the same qualities. So a smaller one on the top and a bigger one on the back part. And this is the way, when we are on the top of the tree, somehow from this apartment, we relate with Pizarro painting on the back. When we make a house on this context, so I was trying to speak a lot about vernacular ideas and things that are on site. And for us, like I said before, it's still quite important to think, how can we still make architecture of our time, and that still has a bit of a fresh air. But we returned to Klimt, and this wood house was somehow always around. But we were asking ourselves, how can we make something as beautiful as this house of Klimt, but in a more contemporary way? So we were just weaving these stripes, like it was already shown in the model. We were just pushing stripes, trying with wood, but we would apply wood not as a kind of a monodirectional element, but we were changing with wood. So in the big facade, we used the bigger scale of plates of wood, and we would put a green bitume in between them to seal, while on the top facades, like in these 2 faces, we would use horizontal wood to also give a little bit more weight to the building. So here we can see there's these stripes that are all in the middle spine, and with the other side, the stripes turn, and the scale is different. And this is a little bit a view from the garden and how these 2 worlds collide between the horizontality of the faces and the more verticality of the stripes. Now the last one. Am I really bad with time? Is it okay? Okay. Okay, so the last one, I decided to put this project because, like I said, it was 2 lost competitions, but we like to believe that in the end we lose the competition, but we don't lose the ideas somehow, no? There's things that always stay with us, and it's our own research. So when we have the opportunity, sometimes it does not occur in this project, but we try to recycle materials, but also ideas. And this is 2 semi-detached houses in Portugal that we are hopefully starting to build the next month, and it's in Aveiro, not so far from here. There's a urban plan that regulates this site, and the urban plan decides where you have a villa and where you have the semi-detached villa. Because it's a urban plan, most of the things were actually already defined. Stepping back from the street 5 meters,
The building can be 8 meters large, can be 15 meters deep, 3 meters of passage. So that was what we had, and we were on the 18 and 17, that was our plots. And we have never made a semi-detached house before, and right away we started to understand that there are certain questions about making a semi-detached house. And a semi-detached house is a typology that actually was invented, or I don't know if invented is the good word, but it was developed in the end of the 17th century by most of it by landlords that wanted to accommodate their employees in a quite efficient and economical way, but still, because it was a lot about representation, they wanted to somehow look good for their friends. So they made these villas inside of this context, and later this typology was imported to cities, and it was disguised as a villa. And there was most of it 2 ways of making semi-detached houses. One, the first, on the left, from Norman Shaw, was to repeat, mirrorizing the facades. So there's a kind of an idea that you have 2 houses attached that are the same, but with a mirror. And then on the right, you also have the Le Corbusier, Weissenhof, and Stuttgart from 27, where you see that the idea is much more to make one single building much more homogenic. So you only see, the only moment where you understand there's 2 houses is this small element that you have on the fenêtre longueur. We decided that neither of those were really interesting for us, or that was not what we were perceiving. We wanted to create something that was ambiguous, so that sometimes you would look and you would think that it's one house, and sometimes you would look and think that it's 2 houses. So we started to work with the most conventional and most prototypal ideas of what's a house. So pitched roof, chimney, and of course, I think Venturi was also trying to somehow search for it. But this house, because it's 2 houses, needed somehow 2 faces. So it needed to have an asymmetry. And this is a picture of Janus, the Roman god of time, where he has 2 heads. One is a younger one, and the other is an older one. The older one looks to the past, while the younger one looks to the future. So in some artists represent them almost similar with small differences, and sometimes it's also more different. But we were really wondering how could we make something that it's quite close. So we presented this to the city council. It was our first model. We presented to the client was happy about it, and then we presented to the city council, and the city council said, it's all good, we like it a lot, it will not be a problem. We returned home, and 2 days after, the city council called us and said, look, there's a problem. We actually forgot to send you a section, and it's not on the file of the project. But now we realize that you cannot make a pitch roof parallel to the street. You can only make a pitch roof perpendicular to the street. The client was already in love with the project. It was quite a down for us. So we decided that we would not tell this to the client until we had a solution. So this is what we did. So we arrived, we explained to the client that we had a problem, we inverted it, and we made the pitch roof perpendicular to the street, but we emulated the old facade on the new facade. And for that, we use tiles, and Aveiro has a huge tradition of tiles also, and the idea is to use tiles that are not good enough to be sold. So, and because of the composition, again, that we recycle a bit from the project you saw before, because of that, it's no longer so important if the tile is a bit broken or not, because the lines will make this less relevant. It will be more about the geometry of the way you apply the tiles and less about the quality of the tile itself. One thing also, as you can see, and we were saying, first, when you look at the facade, it seems that it's a symmetric facade, but then if you look carefully, it's not, because this window, it's the same window that it's here, and then this window is a vertical rectangle, while this is a square, and this window it's to the center, while this window is really a bigger square and aligned to the lateral part. But we kept the 2 doors here. We did not want to make them step back, again, because of this idea of the ambiguity. Is it a house or 2 houses? And we really celebrate this 2 chimney in order to symbolically say that maybe it's only one house. And here you see, with the beautiful pictures of Francisco Ascensão, the two volumes that are next to each other in our office. And the situation of the entrance, and the way that also it articulates, although we need to make a pitch roof to the left, to the other, on the lateral facade, we there assume a platibanda, like a kind of a horizontal, and then the roof just starts after. So there's a lot of trying in with not making what they want. And this is a bit of a picture. Also the trees we decided to put are both citrinos, but on one side is a orange tree, and on the other side is a lemon tree that also creates this friction between the color orange and the yellow. The land is quite steepy, and for economical reasons we did not want to move land. So we imagine the site has a kind of a sequence of spaces. Sometimes the spaces are inside, sometimes the spaces are outside. They are spaces that are thought to be occupied, depending or according a bit to the will of the clients. They can shift, they can change, and they gradually occupy the slope. So here you can see, we enter, we have a kind of a lateral ramp where you can also have a car if you wish. And then you enter, and inside of the house you will also step down. After the house we have a first paved terrace, and then you can have a garden or a swimming pool, and then you have you can have kind of a Obstgarten, kind of a place where you make agriculture, and in the end you have a pergola with a summer kitchen. And here you can see on the section of the house, and the outside are thought somehow a bit in the same way. It's just the way that the house accommodates the slope. We were again wondering a lot how you open a window. And there's this painting from a series of 4 from Magritte that we like a lot. It's called The Human Condition, and it's the last time I read, I promise. And so the painter wrote, "In front of a window, seen from inside a room, I placed a painting representing exactly that portion of the landscape, covered by the painting. Does the tree in the picture hide the tree behind it, outside the room? For the spectator, it was both inside the room within the painting and outside in the real landscape, which is how we see the world, namely outside of us, although havingly one representation of it within us. Similarly, we sometimes remember a past event as being in the present. Time and space lose meaning, and our daily experience becomes paramount. This is how we see the world. We see it outside ourselves, and at the same time we only have a representation of it in ourselves. In the same way, we sometimes situate in the past that it is happening in the present. Time and space thus lose the vulgar meaning that only daily experience takes into account. Questions such as, what does this picture mean? What does it represent? Are possibly only if one of it's incapable of seeing a picture in all its truth. Only in one automatically understands that a very precise image does not show precisely what it is. So for us, it was quite fundamental that inside of this relation with the exterior, sometimes you would create these relations, and there's 2 types of windows in the project. Sometimes they are small squares that tend to frame the outside, a bit like a painting, and sometimes there's a big window, only actually 1 time or 2 times, where the window is a mechanism that tries to disappear, like it was a limit, but only in order to detach from the outside aggression of nature. We showed this to the client, the Mies van der Rohe Casa Resort, and then we made a kind of a quick collage, and we said, look, this is what we will make only small windows in the house, where you always look at the outside in a quite careful way, and then when you arrive in the living room, then you will have a big window where you can see the cherry trees that are on the lower part. It was also quite economical. And this would be a little bit the relation of these spaces, and then the big window that sometimes is there, sometimes is not there. So, yeah, I will not enter again, but the same, like I was saying, we wanted to make a house. It was a lot of pressure. It's for a developer, so we could not spend so much money. But we wanted to make a house that seems quite big, so we returned to these projects from Corbusier. And in Villa Lac you have the wall, but in Villestein you already have like spatial developments like wardrobes, more complex walls. So we tried on the ground floor to make exactly that in a more, of course, less virtuous way and less a talented way, but we have again the same system where it's always possible to walk around these elements, and sometimes it's a pillar, sometimes it's the kitchen that on the other side is a wardrobe, sometimes it's the joker room that for now it's an office, an office, but later can be converted to a sleeping room in case of someone has a more reduced mobility. And the bathroom plays a super interesting role because it's really, again, part of the circulation of the house. For now, it's a guest bathroom with the possibility of becoming a laundry, but it could also be adapted to a bathroom for people in wheelchair or with reduced mobility. And this is a view from a 1:20 model where you are inside of the bathroom and you can see the way this relates to the rest of the house. Yeah, again, somehow the way that the spaces relate to each other, creating these sequences, and then also the way that the outside spaces are part of the same sequences. Again, stepping down, coronating it with the pergola and the summer kitchen. And we had also one law that said we cannot open windows to 3 meters. And then what we did is that it's a quite huge pleasure to have daylight on the kitchen and also important ventilate. So we stepped it back, aligned it, we create a courtyard where the tenants can now grow aromatic plants. It's quite useful to be close to the kitchen for that. And this is what we imagine, to create this inner world that it's protected, and all of the windows then would occupy or would adopt a different shape. So the way also you relate to this garden according to the piece or the room where you are will always be different. And this is a little bit how it somehow, from the main room you can see the kitchen, and you can also see the square window, but you also see the triangle window, and still again maybe see even to the inside. And this is a view through the courtyard. Also, there's an advantage on the top floor. It's a bathroom, and because of the wall that you have in front of it, you can be quite exposed without being worried if your neighbor is watching or not. Quite a naturist project, like you see in this section. When you go up, actually it started as a 2-bedroom apartment, and then the client said it's much better to sell that if we have a lot. It's much more profitable, so we had to add much more rooms. So the plan is a quite dense plan. But we try to still have sometimes the same ideas that we have on the lower part, and it really works with this main core the same way. So here you can always use this articulation to circulate, which this normally would be the kids' rooms. So you would be also quite close from the parents' room. It would be quite closer to arrive here. And like with the facades, we propose to the client that they are super similar, but small changes could occur. So in one of the rooms, we have this communication between the 2 rooms in case, for example, the kids are too close in age, that they still feel that they live together or they sleep together. And in one side, we have a splitted bathroom, while in the other side, not. And this is the house without the roof, and maybe it's complex, but maybe we looked so much to the plan that it seems so obvious to do it. And when you take the roof out, it's still quite, for us, beautiful silhouette and all these events. The way this relates to a pitch roof where we started a project in another sense, it's quite a beautiful discovery when we analyze the model we built. And this is hopefully changing soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rui, very much. Yeah, I feel very inspired and stimulated by that. One of the things that, maybe one of the first questions I'll bring to you actually is, maybe it's to do with the relationship between what's going on within the project and then the references or the stimulus or the kind of influence of external factors. Because while we joked at the beginning about this exchange or relationship between Swiss architecture and Portuguese architecture, in the end, what you've done, which I find really refreshing, is that we've sort of stepped out of national stereotypes, which is actually quite nice, because most of your references, the vast majority of your references, are neither Swiss nor Portuguese. There are a couple, but most of them aren't. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about how they work, how you find them, what you seek in them, and kind of how they play. Because yeah.
So I think it's common to everyone on the way the process of a project works. You know, now we are telling the story here, but there was dozens of other things we could also have showed, things that we looked at. And in this project, there's probably thousands of things we looked at, and somehow in small moments they are still there, but they are no longer so relevant to tell as part of the stories. But the way we look at references, a little bit like we said in the introduction text, is we use them in an operative way, and we try. So I'm deeply in love with architecture, but we try to take more attention to the ideas and not necessarily to the way that they are materialized. We try that certain things appear in the projects, but not as a kind of in a literal way, because the reference never precedes the project. So normally we face a question, there's something that occurs, and between discussions we have, or discussions with friends, or things that we already know, these things start to come. So to speak about things that were in the lecture, when there's this pressure of making a floor plan, it triggered us. There's a certain way of making housing that it's quite good or bad. We don't need to discuss that now. And we always wonder how could we somehow question this, and what was really the mechanism of why do I feel better, or why is the space bigger or not. So we try to then seek in our culture things that somehow send us in those directions. So I remember when I just arrived in Switzerland, I was in the French part first, and this experience of the Petit Maison, that I was overwhelmed by the size of it. So it seemed super small, but then I was not. I must admit, by then I could not realize why it was so generous to me. Mm-hmm. So then when I started to work, sometimes when we start to work on these projects, there's things that come from a previous experience, and that then we try to use them on our projects. But they are normally always posteriori to the things we are doing, or there's questions and we think that somehow these were already treated. We think that everything is invented.
Thank you. I mean, I think I want to just try and be a little bit more precise here, because actually we've had references in all three presentations this afternoon. By far the most with you. But I would say that, in 10, really, I think you had to be looking really carefully at the beginning. There is an image of Vila Nova Arquitetura rotated 90 degrees that flashes every now and then. It's incredibly implicit, and I don't know how many people spotted it. No, in your presentation, actually, the swimming pools in Ticino is extremely explicit. The kind of infrastructural line that then can organize, kind of spatially organize a sort of irregular territory was and then right at the end, there was the comment then that you made about the reference back to Caesar and Evora. So whereas yours are much more dispersed, and actually many of them are artworks, and many American. I guess it slightly reminds me of when, let's say, through 9H, as I mentioned before, first encountered Herzog and de Meuron, and all their references were, let's say, from the art world more than they were, and that was quite new at the time. So maybe you could say a little bit more about, there's La Petite Maison, Le Corbusier, and there's a few architectural ones, but there's also, you have a kind of a deck or a folio of art references, and how do they work?
So I think first it's something that it's quite dear to us. We like art a lot, and
I think the advantage, at least for us, of the art references is that normally they are not translated one-to-one formally in a project. So it's really about one idea. So it's depending on the question again we have, we tackle, sometimes we return a lot to paintings because of the ideas of perception, of how we perceive, and it helps us a lot in how we compose a facade, for example, or what are the themes. And maybe it's also a naive thing because we are such a young practice. I think the practice will make 4 years by the end of the year, and it's also maybe a way to reassure ourselves that we don't need to take too much risk. No, it's like, it's been done, it works, it's good. So it can be seen as a kind. So I really like this idea of the device that helps you to walk, because it's really operative in our way of walking. But sometimes it also supports a little bit what we are trying to do mentally. So it also justifies a little bit to us, it's not to the world, but it also justifies a bit to us that there's a certain degree of complexity in it. And then there's a kind of a special pleasure that it's like when we look at the Jeff Wall picture and it can survive by itself because it's the composition, the qualities are there. And I think there's also a special pleasure in then identifying the reference to Matisse. So we try to work with different layers of complexity, and that in the project there's first layers of understanding that are much more spatial and are made for the persons that will live in these houses, and then there are layers that are maybe for more awakened eyes or cultivated eyes. I don't know if it's a good answer.
No, I'm just kind of quite interested because it feels like, as you say, the art references, I think that to me it feels like they operate slightly differently. The architectural references are slightly more explicit.
Yep.
Right. So a figure in a plan, a way of moving around, those things are. The art ones are much more, and it strikes me that they are more narrative than conceptual. They somehow allow the story to, like, they fill gaps in the story, gaps that may eventually be filled by the reality of the project. So they're sort of part of a kind of storytelling rather than a kind of a locked-in concept. But I enjoy them for that. For that fact, and I wanted to then sort of maybe move on from there to, let's say, another observation, which maybe you could develop. There's a very strong graphic quality to your work, which you were very clear about when it was the flank wall of the housing in relation to the Frank Stella painting. But actually, every floor wall is kind of invested in some kind of figure. And I was wondering, kind of maybe talk a little bit more about process. Like, how do you go about sort of working through, let's say, when you're developing a competition, what ideas are going to be spatial, three-dimensional, and which ones are going to be played out, let's say, through texture, pattern, color?
So, it's a good question. So, I think that figure is of fundamental importance to us. We like figures, and most of our projects have faces, which I think it's one of the things that we somehow can say inherit from Caesar. It's a fascination, but I also find that it's a way to create a sense of empathy from non-architects with the buildings. We are quite interested in this idea how people that are also not architects perceive the buildings, to narrate situations. I remember when I was a kid, there was, let's meet next to the greenhouse or to the house that has a nose, or there's this kind of figuration that is quite important, and it's on the cultural dictionary of people that are non-architects. So we think that it's purely hypothetical, but we think that this is a way that we kind of somehow approach people that are not architects, this more figurative idea, but this is probably not even really about the question you made. When we are working, since this is so important for us, I can no longer speak about the moment where these certain things start to occur.
I was taught with, in a school that it's quite similar to this, where model making and drawing are the basis of our profession, and right away things start to appear since the beginning, and these figures are always somehow there, and they come almost natural, because there's a sense of equilibrium of composition that occur between having the triangular composition. So when you make two windows and the third one, you already create a triangle, which somehow at perception level, you know where you are going, and it creates a sense of equilibrium. No, this is well, it's studied, so we just follow it somehow, and we try that the question about, for example, the way the building would age or the materiality, it's always a second question. So because we are much more interested in how the building is perceived, because we prefer to accept the idea that it will change. And then, of course, we try that the way it changes, it's carefully and controlled. So the way, for example, this the green house, the way that the panels were put it and the way that the bitumen would be applied, it would be a way that when the water would pass, then the joints would be reinforced, and the wood would be, because it was a water wash. So it's I must say that it's probably, you said it right, it's much more graphical than even constructively thought so. And also from our experience, but we work with super low budgets, like the projects that we are really building. So we also live quite well with this idea of the painting. So we think it will change. It will be beautiful nevertheless, like there will be the wrinkles of the house, the white hair of the house. And then if people are not happy, they can always color the hair, change the hair color. It's no longer on us. We try that the buildings that we do are also not untouchable. Like a little bit, I really liked in your lecture when you showed the way that the owner of the house was building already something behind, and you said, we find this super beautiful. I think this is a totally different position according to the way I, for example, was educated, and I enjoy much more this freedom of the evolving, and where the persons that use these spaces reclaim real property. It's not these objects that are untouched. It's not pieces of museum. They evolve, and it's this uncontrolledness of the objects. I find them quite appealing. Also, then the way it's built. But I might not have answered to your question, Tom. Sorry.
No, actually, you answered another question of mine already. So
okay.
We're running out of time. I was going to ask you to talk about,
because this was arranged actually.
I was going to ask you to talk about triangles, but you did. I was quite intrigued by the recurring figure of the triangle. But the graphic and the paint, actually, it reminds me also a little bit of Waller's lecture in Zurich last year, where I seem to remember talking about the painting of the circles or semicircles on doors as ways of bringing a figure to kind of very ordinary elements, and that was a kind of very kind of striking thing. But I think we are probably starting to run out of time. I think we shouldn't close before offering all of you a chance to ask a question. If there's anybody who would.
Thank you. So it's a bit going forward with what is being discussed now and the question of the reception of the works, because you talked a lot about time and a certain, let's say, how to inscribe your work within a certain cultural tradition that is extremely diverse, and I find that very interesting. But at the same time, there's a part of your work that seems to relate more to affects and to a certain, so there's a certain cuteness. There are triangles, but there's also faces, quite a lot of them actually. Mm-hmm. And so I was wondering, is that something that is, let's say, what is the intent behind that? Is that something that makes you think as much as let's say, the precedence? Mm-hmm. Or what role does it have in your work, basically?
Mm-hmm. Well, the work we are doing, it was never described as cute, but it's a new adjective, which is nice.
But for me, it's a very positive.
No, I don't take it badly. It's we like to look at the things that we do in the past in a quite critical way. So every time we finish a project, we are normally quite critical about the things we did, and even if it's built, we look at it and say, we think this is interesting, maybe this will not be interesting, maybe we should rethink this. But what is quite important at the practice, I would change the word cute for joy, and it's a joyful work we do, and we try that the process that is also joyful for us is somehow also translated in the architecture we do. We try that it's joyful, because we believe that in a gray world, it's still possible to make joyful things and to speak about serious things in a quite joyful way. So we try that our architecture has serious, has rational, has economical, that deals with all the questions that every practice does. But if somehow, we like to believe that when we look at the houses or when we look at the projects, if there's a nice sensation that comes out of it, if there's a playfulness that somehow awakens a good sensation in us, but also in the people. We cannot control how the people will receive the work, of course, no? The relation between one and a piece is always the same. We go, we observe something, this thing somehow evokes things in us that are hidden inside of us, that say more about us than about the thing itself, and this is the way that the piece reflects who we are somehow, and maybe our projects for us, I like that you said that it's cute, because maybe it means that we are also cute, or that the ones that look at the house are cute or joyful, and maybe there are people that will look at the house and find them not that good or not that joyful, but maybe it's more like a mirror, maybe it's more the person, but that we cannot control. So resuming, for us it's really, we believe in a way to do things where there's joy and there's pleasure, and we like to think that the objects still somehow express that there's joy in the work we do, and that the projects are also joyful.
Okay, I think one final question. I think there's...
May I?
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Super prepared.
I brought it from Zurich. No, thank you, Rui. I want to say I felt that very inspired with how you show your work and where the work lies now and where the work will develop, as you say. And the title, you didn't talk about it a lot, but I found somehow suiting. The question I had is, maybe there is an observation that I first want to share, is that in some of the images you've shown for, I think, all projects, there was a moment where I was not sure whether I was inside or outside. It was interior, but the feeling of also how you position things, how you explained it through the visual narrative, it could have been both. It could have been an interior loggia, or it's a kind of externalized living room. I find that an incredible quality. So I want to see if you can reflect on that, especially one with the light, and then there was another one in the last project on the rooftop where it really struck me that I was looking at a street light attached to the living room. I find that really powerful, and that I think really reads next to the graphic and to the narrative. The second question was related a little bit to, you work a lot, I think it was mentioned, through geometry, triangles, color, material, application. You kind of, a lot of times, decompose the task. And the task is a lot of times, it's a residential task. So the question goes to maybe the other parts of your practice or the future parts of your practice. So not only one family or two family or six family or six apartment or any family. Let's talk about non-family at all, goes to a kind of programs that you might else do, and also the scales. Because and I'm fascinated about what could be the real translation, the real potential behind the translation of the reference that Tom was asking about to the work, in the sense of the very same reference could be applied to also approaching your house, entering your house, cooking in your house, waking up in your house, etc. If you know what I mean. So it could be also not about the rooms and the kind of residential character, and much more about, again, the inside, outside, the moments which are. And there I was wondering whether you were able to maybe talk about that a bit more. So the non-residential programs, maybe short, but also the kind of the potential behind that to scale it up to the level of a beautiful project like the bus terminal in future. Why not? You know, to really go into the landscape with it, but also to scale it down to something which is fundamentally an object we might hold, you know, in the hand. So that. Maybe there's several questions in that, and you can pick whichever you like. I just want to say that sort of strikes me as a method that you're trusting and you're working, despite, let's say, a couple of, you know, in German you say Aufgaben, no, the tasks that were there, and that's a kind of a Swiss building code or whatever it is. So maybe you can share on those two.
Well, thanks a lot for the nice words. Yes, the first thing, it's a theme that, although it's not present, so I have not really put focus on it, it's something that it strikes us a lot. We, for example, at the ETH, we made 2 semesters consecutively about inside-outside. It's something that it's quite on our table right now. And we believe that also because of climate change and the way that the temperature is also raising, you know, what does it really mean to live in a space? We are interested in spaces in the end, and not necessarily if it's inside or outside, but and because of that, we are interested in the mutation of the occupation of a space. So, for example, you were saying if this is a lodge or a living room, the nomenclature or the way you define it is not interesting for us. It's the way that then it's inhabit, no? So maybe it can really be a lodge for right now 8 months of the year in Portugal, where you could always live with these open doors, and then you really also have more outside space because it's warmer, so you use more the outside, and it's more about being in the shadow and not necessarily being in or out. And then in the winter you also have a small, so in the summer you have a bigger house because everything is a bit outside, and we really try most of the times that the projects are really crossing, so that also the air flows through the house, which is one of the main reasons why you would feel outside, no? That the air, you have this airflow. So to really translate this, to use certain architectural devices like like overscaled doors in certain areas, or doors that are able to disappear, or I'm probably not really allowed to speak about this, but we just recently submitted a competition where we could not make a balcony, and then the idea was exactly that where a window could disappear and then all the kitchen was the loggia. So this was our idea, because we could not afford to pay it, and because we could not really extend it. So it's something that it's quite dear to us right now, because we really believe that it's an economy of means. Why, you know, maybe you don't need to build a terrace and a loggia. Maybe if you have a space that can be a loggia and a terrace and an interior space, it's also a question of way of thinking, no? How houses, and in the vernacular architecture, I come from Alentejo, a region in the interior of Portugal, that it's quite warm in the summer, and the area I come, it's really cold on the winter. So this idea of spaces that would somehow articulate inside and outside was made in a kind of a progressive way, to the point that in winter we only lived in the kitchen where there was the fire. You know, even not my generation, but my grandparents, they lived only in this big kitchen. And then in the summer you had much more space. So, you know, you always had the courtyard, and then you had small spaces that are covered, and then where you would keep the seeds. So this progress, the way we inhabit, I think it's, maybe we should look at these examples more in that way. Maybe sustainability is also about space, about square meters, and about how you really need to build. And to the second question, which is super, there's a lot of points. Not sure I can pick it. We make several projects that are not housing, where it was a little bit the theme to speak about housing and to speak about sustainability. But these things, for example, we made a competition for a big school in Renan that we run third with our friends of Cabinet. And in this school, all these ideas were somehow there, but applied in a bigger scale. So we decided that, for example, one building would have the square motif, and then everything we made at that building would always be around squares. And then it's not in one project, we would not have several shapes. We would really attach, because again, we thought, it's so beautiful for a student to say, in which pavilion are you having class? I'm in the square pavilion, or in the circle pavilion. And each pavilion would have then a color. We kept all the existing structures. We built 2 new ones, and then even the existing ones that needed to be renovated. We just attached wood facades, and then every pavilion had a color. And this would also create a way to inhabit the site, but it's a bigger scale. So all these ideas somehow are condensed in one project, and there it was condensed in a bigger site. But it's not probably a good answer, sorry.
I think we've probably got to wrap up now, but maybe I could just wrap up just with the observation that while you were speaking, looking through that square window, there is a triangular buttress with 2 semicircular holes, a landscape rising up. The white flowers were glowing in the sun, and all of that was matched with your presentation, and it just fit together. Everything you were talking about was going on outside the window as well as on the screen, so it was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well done. Very nice.
Just for the goodbye notes. So before you leave, we just want to say a couple of words of thank you, at least from my side. My first thank you goes to our sponsors, Panorama. They were relentless in the support they gave to us in preparing this conference, and we hope to continue to work with them in our third conference. So thank you very much, Panorama. We also want to thank the faculty, because you were also relentless in giving us all the support and openness and very warm welcome that you gave us in organizing this event. Of course, a big thank you to our friends from the ETH that traveled so far, so to also help us bring about this conference and make it a concrete reality. Of course, thank you for the architects. They were the masterpieces of this conference. I really enjoyed attending, and I really enjoyed preparing every single work with you. So a big thank you to you as well. Last but not least, a big thank you to my team, and my team is also composed of real people that work a lot and made a huge effort to bring this conference to reality. So also a big thank you to Joanna. She was really amazing in making this dream come true. So thank you very much for you also, the audience, for coming and for attending. I hope you found the conference an interesting one, and I hope you can follow us in the next conference next year. So thank you very much. Also give the floor to the Dean so he can give us a final word.
I've just listened to words that are like music from me. Talking about the third conference is a great prospect for the future, and so I hope that this go on. I have to I'm thankful to everybody that collaborated to make this session happen. All the architects that presented their work, their incredible work. Of course, my colleagues from ETH-Zürich, Philip Ursprung and Tom Emerson. And I would like also to thank the consulate, of course, and the consul, and also Joanna. And I cannot forget also the team here in Porto. So Adriana is over there. Thank you so much. And of course, my colleagues. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. And don't forget that we have a cocktail. We have to climb the ramp over there and go to the gallery where we'll be served the port wine. Thank you so much.